And we are recording this, and it's also already live on IoTech Facebook.
All right, thank you, Ajito. I think we'll make a start now.
Yeah, please do.
Okay. Hello, everyone, and welcome to session A of this virtual satellite activity, Further Challenges for Warnings of Tsunamis, which is a contribution to the Safe Ocean Laboratory of the UN Ocean Decade. My name is Rick Bailey. I'm head of the Secretariat for the IOC UNESCO Indian Ocean Tsunami Warning and Mitigation System and a former chair of the Intergovernmental Coordination Group for that system. I'll be serving as the overall moderator for this satellite activity. I guess like many of us, but no more than the over 230,000 who sadly lost their lives, the 26th of December 2004 certainly changed my life. I'm sure you can all remember seeing probably for the first time those graphic images of the devastating tsunamis impacting communities around the Indian Ocean, and over such a very short period of time. By working and being stronger together since then, we've come a long way, building on experiences and the expertise of the Pacific Tsunami Warning System established in the 1960s after the devastating tsunami of 1960. We have now also established tsunami warning mitigation systems for the Indian Ocean, Caribbean, Northeast Atlantic and Mediterranean seas. Since 2004, the tsunamis, of course, keep tragically coming. Notably, there was a tsunami in 2011 that devastated Japan, where more than 20,000 people lost their lives. And then, of course, the recent Thailand tsunami, where remarkably, but still tragically, 4 people lost their lives despite widespread impacts. So now we'd like to go to a message from Dr. Alexander Frollo, the Vice Chair of the Intergovernmental Oceanographic Commission of UNESCO, and chair of the working group that oversees and helps coordinate the global tsunami program of IOC, and to provide some more words of welcome.
Dear colleagues, good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone, and thank you all for joining the webinar for the challenges for warnings of tsunamis. 87% of all recorded tsunami events are associated with the great underwater earthquakes. Among other reasons should be called underwater volcanic eruptions, underwater landslides, and even rapid changes in barometric pressure. There are the ocean's most dangerous waves. They threaten the safety of nearly every coastal community in the world. In response to the devastating Indian tsunami of December 2004, the IOC, together with their partners, has developed a very well-organized and focused global tsunami early warning and mitigation system. 173 countries support it. They share their data internationally and receive critical information, forecast, and warnings from 11 regional tsunami service providers. We have to say that existing tsunami early warning systems are mainly focused on the forecast and warnings of tsunami of seismic origin. So there remains a fundamental capability gap in providing accurate, actionable forecast of non-seismic tsunami waves. The 31st session of the IOC Assembly, which took place in June last year, approved the establishment of the tsunami program in the framework of UN Ocean Decade. It provides a unique opportunity for implementation of advanced technology, new scientific results for detection and prediction all types of tsunami, including non-seismic one. The webinar is an excellent venue for exchange of ideas, data, and information to create a new partnership in support of the Ocean Decade Tsunami Program. I would like to thank Mr. Rick Bailey, Head of Secretariat of the IOC Indian Ocean Tsunami Warning and Mitigation System, as well as all speakers for their great job in implementation and preparation of this very important event. I wish all the participants every success, and thank you very much for your attention.
Right, thank you, Alexander. Now we also have a message from Bernardo Aliaga, who's the acting head of the IOC Tsunami Unit in Paris.
Hello, my name is Bernardo Aliaga. I am with the Tsunami unit of the Intergovernmental Oceanographic Commission of UNESCO. I would like to welcome you to this webinar that is organized by colleagues of the Tsunami unit based in Melbourne, Perth, Paris, Jakarta, and Fiji. The webinar will feature outstanding experts that will share with you their real experiences in dealing with non-seismic and complex sources of tsunamis, and will also share the state of knowledge about these kind of events. I'm sure you will witness many other events like this one, and I am convinced that this is one more step in the process of getting more efficient for the next time that lives will be at risk of non-seismic tsunami sources. So I wish you all a very rich experience with this webinar, and I express my hopes that with this kind of activities and events, we are learning more to save more lives the next time. Thank you, and wish you all the best.
Well, thank you too, Bernardo. So indeed, tsunamis generated by the more common mechanism, large undersea subducting earthquakes, are already difficult enough to warn for. The tsunamis generated by volcanic eruptions and flank collapses, landslides, including submarine landslides, and specific atmospheric conditions pose even further challenges. So the overall objective of this satellite activity is to increase community resilience to tsunami hazard by, firstly, gaining an understanding of the current knowledge of tsunamis generated by non-seismic complex sources. And secondly, from recent and past events, learning what is required, working together to enhance our warnings and response to these even further challenging scenarios. So just before we start, some housekeeping. My colleague Dito Kodijak will be facilitating the presentations. My colleague Nora Gale will be facilitating and monitoring the live chat and Q&A. If you have any questions for speakers and the panelists, please put them in the Q&A. And depending on the time we have, we will ask them for you at the appropriate time in the agenda, i.e. in the Q&A session after all the speakers are presented, then also later during the panel discussion. In your question, and if possible, please state who the question is for. A summary of this meeting will also eventually be available online and emailed to registered participants. For our speakers and panelists, if you've not already done so, kindly mute your microphone when you're not speaking. Okay, let's start now, and we'll start off with our keynote address on lessons learned from the Tonga 2022 tsunami event. This will be jointly given by a number of speakers. The first speaker will be Dr. Laura Kong of the IFC UNESCO NOAA International Tsunami Information Centre. Over to you, thanks, Laura.
Thank you, Rick. If I can have the first slide presented. Thank you. So I guess you can also, right, that be fine. All right. Good afternoon, good morning, good night, all over the world. I've just been asked to give a very short few minutes of introductory briefing, probably to set the stage for what I think will be a couple of hours of very interesting, complex, and probably thought-provoking talks and interventions. So just to start off, I really just wanted to emphasize the concept of community awareness and preparedness. Next slide. And to just bring us from the global down to the Tongan event. As you know, sources over the last 3,000, 4,000 years, they are tsunamis that are happening all over the world, from Arctic subduction zones, from earthquakes, from tsunamis, from volcanic eruptions, landslides, and just bringing us down to what happened in January at the Hunga, Tonga, Hunga, Hapai, and Tonga. Next slide. And from a brief and very simplistic, but I think very critical, especially as we think of unexpected events, always a tsunami is a series of ocean waves. It is definitely caused by earthquakes mostly, but as we saw in volcanic eruptions, and for a typical subduction zone earthquake, we can get waves and run-ups as high as 40 meters. We can't predict them, so anytime, anywhere, and if it's local, as we saw in Tonga, it can happen and hit you within minutes, 5 minutes, few minutes. And what is going to happen is, as we saw nearly in this event, but all the other events over the last decades, is devastating flooding, contamination of soils, marine ecosystems and coral reefs damaged, flattening of landscapes. Next slide, please. And to remind us, over history, something like 70% are in the Pacific, but we have just as many and significant ones in the Indian Ocean from 2004, in the Atlantic from Lisbon in 1755, et cetera, et cetera. Most of them are caused by earthquakes, earthquake-generated landslides, but again, a few percent, a very significant few percent from volcanic eruptions. And if we were to look globally, something like 90% are going to caused by these local or regional tsunamis, something that's going to hit us within a few minutes or an hour. Next slide. So what happened in Tonga? I think everyone is very familiar with it, but I just wanted to bring in a few things as we go forward. One is, of course, it was not an earthquake. So everything we had prepared for, those 90% of the events, did not happen. And so we were left with warning for an unfamiliar event. And what does that mean? Simplistically, it means we did not know something was going to happen until we saw it, till we detected it, and then we could warn it. So what about next time? In a very simple sense, the science is about new and faster and better detections and forecasts, things we can put in the water that will allow us to detect something other than an earthquake, something that can do it faster, and then to provide those forecasts for any waves that might ensue. What are we going to do about a community? We really have to say, are we ready? Have we planned ahead? Have we been prepared? And really, if we come right down to it, if we have no warning because we haven't detected yet, we're going to rely on what we call nature's tsunami warnings, right? The feel, see, hear, and probably run. And how do we be safe? Of course, we've heard many stories about being prepared and being tsunami ready. Next slide. So what happened, I would just couch this in terms of see, hear, feel, act. This was really not only a nearby close event, but it was a natural warning in a sense. So we heard the loud explosion, we heard the volcano erupting, we saw, or I didn't see, but our colleagues in Tonga saw the steam and the ash cloud, and they felt the ground shaking. So feel, see, heard, and they knew something was going to happen since they'd never seen it before. Okay, but if you think of it, happened almost the day before. It was a small eruption. It was small waves. The warning center, the Tonga Meteorological Service, did put out a marine warning. They smelled the sulfur the next day. So kind of a thought maybe something was going to happen, but they remembered the past so that when it did happen, about 7 hours later, they act. So as they saw it as it arrives, they saw these unusual ocean waves. They saw the fast draining. They saw swirling water and eddies. I think we had reports of birds flying, ash falling, animals disturbed. So again, even if it wasn't an earthquake-generated tsunami, this was another type of tsunami, and we saw these, I would say, natural warning signs. Next slide. So this is nearly my last slide, and in a brief, I want to say that, yes, this was an aseismic or a complex event. It was an unexpected event, but we have to make sure, something like 90% are from earthquakes. So let's not let our guard down. We've got to prepare for the earthquake, but we have to be aware of the other 10%. If it's close by, we need to be ready. We need to that planning ahead. I've heard this this morning in the core event. I keep hearing this as everyone speaks. If nothing else, let's plan ahead and let's be prepared. And ultimately, for a local event, it's really simply about ETA. How long is it going to be before a wave hits you? From all the sources, from volcanoes from landslides, from earthquakes, and communities to plan ahead and get ready and to practice. So practice is about exercises. Practice is about also taking that personal action and responsibility. If you don't get a warning sign, if you don't hear a siren, you've got to say, do something. And finally, my last part is about communications. We've heard about the cable that broke. We've heard about all the phones got down. And in the end, it was really a simple VHF radio that was used to issue warnings. So reliable, robust, redundant, and realistic. So broadcast, simple, and must reach everyone, both with low and high tech services. And my last slide, please. So I just wanted to leave everyone, not necessarily from Tonga, but actually with a Hawaiian proverb. It's called an olelo noeau. It's a wise saying, and it goes like this: Iliki keke, iliki kekai ika ope la lilo, ililo no he ha va va va, which translates to a person who fails to watch out often loses. Never turn your back on the sea. I think, it doesn't matter whether it's a tsunami, it's a storm surge, or even a hurricane. Very common sense, something our ancestors knew about, something that we really should take heed as we move forward. So with that, I will move it back to Rick, our moderator, and look forward to hearing everyone's interventions for the coming couple of hours. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Laura. There's some excellent words of advice there. I guess we've all got to continue to respect the ocean, particularly its power it has. Look, our next speaker, Daniela Kula, the Deputy Secretary and Director of the Tongan Geological Services, who, along with the following speaker, was in the middle and responding to this disaster as it happened. So we look forward to hearing from Daniela.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. For the opportunity to be part of this panel. So I'll just talk briefly on the evolution of volcano eruption. Next. So the infamous Hunga volcano eruption on the 15th of January, 2022 was the last of a series of events that took place over 26 days, commencing on the 20th of December 2021. After this day was followed by a series of earthquakes, which lasted until the 16th of January. But this event on the 15th, starting on the 20th of December 2021, this was the 8th eruption of the Hunga volcano in its history, with only 2 likely equivalent eruptive magnitude, which has been radiocarbon dated to have occurred in 200 AD, and a second one at 1100 AD. And these dates indicates a 900-year cycle of large eruptions of such size for the Hunga volcano. This also raised the question if these 2 large eruptions caused devastating tsunami, as we have experienced in its 3rd cycle of large eruptions earlier this year. So on this slide, we are looking at the bathymetry of the Hunga volcano. And you can see from the arrows, there has been collapsed chutes on its flanks. So historically, these must have generated, the submarine landslide must have generated something in the past, but we have yet to find evidence. In the more recent eruptions in 1988, there was evidence of lava flows. You can see on the bottom right corner, evidence of lava flow in this eruption in 1988, which the island disappeared shortly after. In the 2009, tuff cones on the northwest side of the caldera, which is around 6 kilometers diameter, and the 2014 eruption in between Hungatonga and Hungahapai Island. So these are the eruption activities or which the volcano has evolved in the recent years. Next slide. So starting from the 20th of December 2021 last year, the eruption started and it built the island up to a stage where it was at its largest size in terms of above sea level, the volume above sea level. And then on the 14th, there was a surprise eruption, which was, it has been quiet after the 7th of January, 2022. And then it was silent for almost just a week. And then it erupted on the 14th. And this is the result of the eruption, splitting the islands again in two. Next slide, please. So shortly after the slide you just recently saw, we saw this spectacular image captured by Himawari 8 satellite, which this is by far the largest in the history of the satellite era, releasing plume up to 58 kilometers into the stratosphere, dispersing radially up to 700 kilometers in diameter. So the initial estimates of the kinetic energy released from this is approximately 5 to 8 megatons, not including the thermal energy components. So, but next slide, please. So going back to the satellite imageries and analyzing what actually, try to determine what actually happened. We noted that the eruption started early on at 4:01 UTC. So these captures started at 4:16. We can see the plume is already rising into the atmosphere, but you can see on top the initial shock waves heading eastward. And then you can see a section of the plume has growth towards the eastern side, and it's strongest going that side. So that's indicating the movements or the collapsing of the volcano at the sea floor. You can also see other jets jetting through the northwest, indicated by the green color there. And also there's another jet going southeast. These are indicating collapse in the caldera at the sea floor. Next slide, please. So these are all activities indicating what was actually going on at the volcano. So these are also some images raised by some of our Japanese colleagues, indicating that the eruption first started on the southern side. If you can see on the bottom side, the black is the highest plume portion. It's rising from the southeast area where the 1988 eruption took place. So there's a theory of a trapdoor caldera opening up on this side. So these probably are the first event that first started the tsunami waves coming from the volcano. And then the rest of the other portions of the island started collapsing. But this slide only indicates the first eruption area. Next slide, please. And starting way, way earlier. And this also is evident of why the waves were received, or people citing the waves much earlier than 5:15 or around 5:15 local time, the waves arriving at the western side. This is also showing the direction of the collapse. So you can see the timelines outlining the size of the islands in certain years. Green one obviously is the 2019, and the red one is the purple one is the 2021, which was the result of the eruption in 2014. But in the red one is the remaining of the island. So you can see the Hungatonga Island, only 9% island is remaining, and most of it has collapsed inward into the caldera. So is the Hungahapai, most of it to the eastern side collapsed also inwards to the caldera, and some are evident flowing out to the northeast side, which you recall from the previous slides, the plume shooting into the northwest, and also the southeast shoal that remains here, which are now disappeared because we have identified that this was the first site that started the eruption. So there's possible a collapse of the flanks to the east side as well, and indicated by the large eruption pushing towards the eastern side. Next slide, please. So this is a slide indicating what remains now, taken on the 17th of January. You can see there's no more waves slashing on the southeastern side of where the 1988 shoals used to be. So now we are hopeful that the survey by research vessel Kaharoa will be arrived soon and have some more detail on the resultant formation of this caldera. Next slide. So out of all the activities that I just described before, this is the actual waveform captured by the tide gauge at Nuku'alofa. These are actual arrival timelines. The modeling that we've done so far are not yet closely aligned, but we are the more bathymetry or updated bathymetry that we have shared with the modelers. The more accurate the bathymetries are, the closer it becomes, it matches this actual arrival time. But matching the arrival time here, it's 4:32, the first wave arrived at Nuku'alofa, but then the eyewitnesses thinks that the waves actually arrived after 4:15. So while we're still gathering data to confirm this, more work is ongoing to confirm the timeline of the actual arrival time on the western side, which is much faster and much slower on when it arrives in Nuku'alofa. But this also demonstrates that the Great Barrier Reef around Nuku'alofa is a good first line of defense for at least for the low-lying areas around Nuku'alofa. Yet the waves arrived at very high at around 2.9 meters above sea level. So that's still a threat. These waves pushed inland up to 500 meters in the Nuku'alofa area, which is something that we have to plan for and increase our resilience in the urban area. Next slide, please. So this is an eruption timeline. I won't go through it, but I'll leave to the participants to go through. And you have any questions later, you can comment on. But this also indicates there were several earthquakes associated with this eruption, and also several light, but also found information that this event has the most lightning in all events around the world. So these are historical events that had occurred, but you can go through this timeline in your own time. Next slide, please. So that was all that I had prepared to talk about this afternoon. Given the time limit, I appreciate the opportunity to speak on behalf of our agency, and look forward to further discussions and collaborations with the UNESCO. Thank you.
Thank you, Taniela. Thank you for that wonderful description of what happened. Again, those graphic pictures are there, a bit like 2004, to see this remote sensing, capturing how this volcanic plume is developing. I think that all caught our attention, and a lot more information to be gained from there, of course, because such a complex reaction. Okay, thank you again. Okay, our next speaker is Ofa Fa'anunu. Ofa is the Director of Meteorology at the Tongan Meteorological and Post Radio Services. And again, like Taniela, Ofa was right in the mix here when it came to the tsunami warnings, and also helping prepare awareness of the community. Over to you. Thanks, Ofa.
Thank you, Rick, and thank you very much for the opportunity to share our experiences on the Hunga Hapai event. I'll be talking on the warning side of things. Appreciate if you could load my slides, please. So I'll concentrate on what happened on the 15th, but as you know from Daniela's presentation, the activities started on the 14th. The eruptive activity during that day, early in the morning, we could smell the sulfur in the air here in the main island, and towards the later in the day, we issued the marine tsunami warnings based on waves that were recorded on the Nuku'alofa tide gauge, as well as observations from people in the outer islands in the Hapai group, and from the harbor master of unusual sea activity, which Laura had talked about in the harbor. So these marine warnings remained until 11 o'clock on the 15th, 11 in the morning. And then we canceled those warnings, and then 6 hours later, then we had this major event. So next slide. So this is a image taken from the meteorological office, which is at the airport. It's probably the furthest away from the volcano, but on the main island. So this is what the weather observer photographed that day. 13 minutes after 5 o'clock in the afternoon, he could see this, the eruption was a little bit more than what we had seen in the previous eruptions. Yeah? Next slide. And then a few minutes after that, around this time, we heard the big boom, or the sonic boom. This is from 7 or 8 minutes later from the previous observation. Next. So at 5:21, when we heard the sonic boom, the duty officer went directly on air around 5:24 and gave the warnings out to the public to evacuate. At this point in time, we found out later that some of the islands had already, the waves already had reached those parts. But on that day, when we gave out the warnings, there was about 20 minutes of warning for the people in the capital to make it to safety in accordance with our warnings. Unfortunately, not for the western side and the island of Atata near Tongatapu and those islands in the Ha'apai group. At around 5:45, that was the time when I had arrived at the office and started taking over operations. As I was talking on the radio, the waves hadn't arrived in the capital yet, but as I was talking, the town officer from the western side of the island was already reporting a few waves had already washed up, and there were a few houses already in the middle of the road and things like this. But this is the image. The image here is what we have capturing the wave arriving, first wave arriving in the capital. You can see the palace office, the palace there, right in the corner of the image. I just wanted to show this. Next slide. Yeah, and Daniela had already talked about this, but these were the waves that were recorded on the tide gauge. Unfortunately, about an hour later, in the middle of the event, the tide gauge failed, probably due to the volcanic ash that was deposited on the transmitter. And of course, around the same time, our undersea cable that connects us to the rest of the world got damaged, cut off, which we had to negotiate for 6 weeks after the eruption. At the same time, the national radio failed as well because of the volcanic ash depositing on the transmitter. So we were basically in the dark here for many hours after 6:30. We continued to give out warnings, both Daniela and I. And around 11 o'clock that night, I finally managed to connect through satellite phone to the Volcanic Ash Advisory Center in Wellington to get updates on the volcano activity. And then we coordinated with Daniela. He had to go out to the ocean himself to assist us in the warning center and observing the waves. And then we downgraded the warnings to tsunami marine warnings around 2 a.m. in the morning. But it was a very difficult time for all of us in terms of the warning situation, trying to get information out to the people. It was dark. It was nighttime. Yeah. Next slide. Yes, this is our timelines of our warnings. I don't think I'll talk about that too much. We've talked about this a brief before. Next slide. Just to remind us all of the magnitude of what happened. This is the west side of Tongatapu. That was one of our biggest resorts, Wakaloa Resort, totally flattened. And the wave just ran across that peninsula. Around this area, was where one life was lost in the 4 casualties that were recorded in Tonga. Next slide. Yeah, these were the impacts. Like was mentioned, 4 casualties. About 200 homes were seriously damaged or destroyed. Initially, we had there was a lot of damages to around the fruit trees and the crops, the vegetables, particularly yams. The wave run up was up to 15 to 20 meters in some areas, and like what Daniela mentioned, 500 to 600 meters inundation into many places. Next slide. So some of the lessons learned from us from the warning center is straight after the event we realized the gaps that we had in the monitoring the volcanoes. Basically, because we haven't seen these things before, and we concentrate too much on the seismic tsunamis. We had procedures, but not in the detail that would have been more given us more readiness in terms of warnings. But we realized that the meteorological watch officers that working 24/7 should undergo some volcano training. Some work needs to go into modeling of the volcanoes around our area to find out the tsunami arrival times. That will enable us to provide better awareness to the communities before these things happen. As we know, when we have a very short time to warn, it's vital that that awareness is provided well ahead of time for the people to understand the risk that they are in living in Tonga. Straight after the event, ad hoc group was formed around the region on the event, looking at to quickly put together some regional procedures for under the tsunami warning system framework to provide some procedures for dealing with volcano generated tsunami, which I'm pleased to say that has been approved. But it just goes to, from this event, just goes to show and emphasize what Laura was talking about earlier about the importance of awareness and looking at the natural warning signs. We had some radio talkbacks after the event to talk about the natural warning signs and we have our people in the northern islands of New Fo. They reported that the sulfur smell should have been an indication to the people that something big was going to happen, especially when it's that far off, 65 kilometers offshore, for us to smell the sulfur from that a distance. But I think the natural warning signs, the volcanic boom, the sonic boom itself saved a lot of people itself. The people were well aware, and when the thing erupted, our warnings was just to guide people on what was happening and to guide where to go. But the actual warnings before, the day before, and when the eruption happened, it was so massive that almost everybody knew that something bad was going to happen. But it also brought out the need for us to look at our communication redundancies. What can we do to make sure that we are able to continue to put out warnings during these challenges, during these sort of challenges, but also better coordinating of communications to avoid things like congested lines and things like this. But also at the time, Tonga did not have a functional seismic network, which was a huge gap that we hopefully are addressing right now with assistance of Australia to put in seismic stations. But we think that if we had those seismic stations in place, especially to monitor the smaller tremors associated with a building volcano, that more awareness could have been provided or could have been known on the developments on the volcano itself. And then there's still some discussions in country on the coordination of national agencies, how to better coordinate. But all in all, I think the message that got across to me strongest is the having the public awareness, teaching people the warning signs and teaching them how to act on their own during this when this surprising or events, quick events that happened without warning happen, because as we saw, the communications can just fail, and then everybody we can't get the messages across from the agencies. But thank you for the opportunity.
Marlo, I mean, that's wonderful. Thank you for sharing that with us. Not only the scientific challenges, but also the practical challenges that you have to face in situations like with comms down, the contingency planning. But I guess, you know, my visits to Tonga, what's impressed me always is the professionalism of all the authorities involved here, and as you said, the importance of educating the communities as well, particularly for this near field, like Laura said too, where quite often it's the natural warning signals that are going to get to you far faster than the technical systems can possibly do. But yeah, look fantastic. The devastation there, the low casualties, it's really commendable to you and the communities. So thank you again. Okay, now our next speaker in this keynote, I know we're a little bit behind time, but it's been so fantastic to share these experiences. So let's go now to Bill Fry, and Bill's going to learn us, okay, what have we learned here for enhancing our warning systems? Over to you, thanks, Bill.
Thank you, Rick and team, for the opportunity to talk to you. And I'd like to take a minute before I spend a very brief time telling you about what we learned to acknowledge the efforts of Ofa and Taniela, whom we've just heard from. I sincerely believe that their work leading up to the eruption and through the tsunami response have saved lives. And I think that the work they've done afterward in the recovery phase has also meant that the recovery in Tonga will go as smoothly as possible. And so huge respect going out to them. I'm talking to you right now as chair of the Tsunami Detection and Monitoring Working Group of the Pacific Tsunami Warning and Mitigation System. I'm just going to give you two key takeaway points, hopefully at the end of the next 3-4 slides. Next slide, please. The map on the right-hand side shows you in the blue star the location of the Tonga Hunga Hapai volcano. Radiating out from that in the different rainbow colors from hot red colors to cold blue colors shows you a synthetic or a predicted travel time of the tsunami wave going out from that. And the blue lines show you every hour contour interval. So after the first hour, following the volcanic eruption, we would predict the wave would be at the first blue line, and then each line would be another hour on top of that. The problem with, or the largest challenge with dealing with volcanoes, volcanic tsunami sources, or any tsunami source that doesn't originate from an earthquake, is that most of our tools, just like Laura told you, and just like you've no doubt heard countless times after HTHH, most of our tools are predicated. They're based on an earthquake source. We know how to look at the earthquake source and make some estimation or a forecast of the wave impacts on land. Volcanic tsunamis are not like that. When there is a vast range of mechanisms when a volcano erupts that can generate a tsunami. The information we have about that process going from the eruption to the tsunami is very limited, especially in response mode. And it means we can't use those traditional techniques to forecast arrival of the waves. So then we're left looking at the ocean itself. We're left looking at evidence of the tsunami rather than looking at the process that generated it. We're left looking at an observation of the wave to use that for forecast. And that's going to be my first takeaway point. In the HTHH eruption, waves arrived at Nuku'alofa. Those were the first observations, geophysical observations or tidal observations we had that a wave had been generated. So the first observations of the tsunami itself were when the impact was on the coast of Nuku'alofa. And then we had measurements from the deep ocean tsunami observation network. That's what I'm showing you on the right-hand side in green triangles. Each of those green triangles represent a place on the ocean floor where there's a pressure sensor that can monitor a tsunami wave traveling over it and send that information to the warning systems. We densified the network a couple of years ago, and that's what you see right around the blue star. You'll notice there are a few of these green triangles, a few of these tsunamometers very close by, and it meant that we had an ocean observation within about 30 minutes after the eruption itself. Next slide, please. So I've just said we don't have the ability to measure and describe the process starting the tsunami, and we can't make a forecast based on that. All we have is that ocean observation. We've already had a couple of workshops where we've talked through the procedures that we've implemented for HTHH. I don't have the time to cover that again right now. I will just tell you that we developed a method to use any observation, the first available observation, either a tide gauge observation or an ocean bottom dart observation of the tsunami itself, one single observation to trigger a series of actions and alerts to let local and regional entities know that we've measured a tsunami wave. So we're taking, and this is what I think is a major step change from the way we've previously approached warning. We very much previously, after 2004, approached instrumental warning as a distant problem. We haven't managed to tackle the local problem. What happens when the tsunami is 1 hour away, up to 3 hours away, or regional travel time distances? And I think this is marking a point in time where we will start to use any evidence of a tsunami wave to trigger a sequence of actions. And that's the interim procedure that we implemented for HTHH. Next slide, please. The implications of HTHH for future events, and this is your big high impact takeaway slide. One is that we need to focus on planning and education. We know with the network on the right-hand side that there will be many possibilities of tsunami generation that will not reach our sensors in enough time to give the nearest coastal communities instrumental warning and forecasts of the tsunami wave. Those communities need to be prepared in advance for what are the things they can do in advance to lower their risk. And then once something happens, how do they know that a tsunami wave might be coming? What are those natural signs? And what is their strategy for dealing with that? First takeaway, we need education and planning as much as we can get. We need 100% of communities tsunami ready. The second takeaway that is, if sufficient evidence exists to say, yes, we believe there is a tsunami, we don't have enough information to forecast the tsunami with very low uncertainties. All we know is that there's a dangerous wave. And when I say a dangerous wave, it might be over the critical 100 centimeter threshold for coastal amplitude triggering land evacuation. It might be some other threshold that's useful for a particular community. But if we see a single observation of that, we need to have procedures in place to act upon that observation. Next slide. And this is the last slide. So towards local instrumental tsunami early warning, the first point is not instrumental tsunami early warning. It's just get tsunami ready. Make that a focus. That needs to be happening in the background while we improve our science to develop a quicker warning products. We need to densify observations. In the previous two slides, I've shown you with the network of ocean bottom observation systems. You should have noticed that those hour contours I showed you and talked to you on the first slide, sometimes the distance between the DART stations, the green triangles, is larger than that hour window. That means that we won't always be able for every source to detect the source, to detect the tsunami within that 20-minute time. So we need to densify those observations. And those observations can be DARTs like I was just talking about, or they could be cabled observatories like the Japanese DONET or SNET. They could be smart cables, which you'll hear about from Bruce Howe in a later session, or they could be coastal tide gauges. So aspirationally, we need to use ocean observations as a basis for forecasting rather than relying on proxies like earthquakes and understanding volcanic eruptions. Thanks.
Thanks, Bill. But that's great to see such quick action, now reaction to what we've learned from the Tonga event and procedures being put in place. Because as I always say, lessons learned, it's lessons to be learned. They're only learned when we actually go and do something about it and pass the next test, at least. But thank you, Bill. Now we'll move on to McCreary, who's the director of the Pacific Tsunami Warning Center located in Hawaii, and Chip's often in the middle of all of these warnings going on around the Pacific. Over to you, Chip, and I'm afraid I'll have to be very quick on this one. Thank you.
Okay. Yes, thanks very much, Rick, and good to have an opportunity to talk to everyone. Our previous speakers have done a nice job of describing the importance of tsunami preparedness, really of the challenges faced in Tonga with this unusual event, and then also the regional challenges from Bill there about trying to protect his country, New Zealand, from something like this from a regional perspective. So I'm going to talk to you just a little bit about our responsibility. The Pacific Tsunami Warning Center is the tsunami service provider for the entire Pacific. So we were looking at this from the standpoint of trying to get information out about what might happen to coasts across the Pacific. And and that had its own set of challenges. So I think if we skip ahead here, maybe to slide number 8, so you have to jump ahead here because we're pretty short on time. So oh no, that was one too many. Back one there. Thanks, Ardito. So you've already kind of seen this picture. This is the signal arriving on the gauge at the Nuku'alofa tide gauge, and this was our first indication that something was going on. And it was a little bit serendipitous because of the activity that had happened the day before. We knew that there was eruptive activity going on at the Hunga Tonga volcano, and so we knew where the source was, and we just expected, oh, this signal was probably coming from that volcano. And also because of the activity the day before, we had set up a special trigger on this particular gauge so that if a signal came in, it would sound the alarms at our center and alert our folks to working there that they needed to come in and respond. So if we go to the next figure, our common scientific sense about this, we don't have the tools to forecast a non-seismic tsunami, but being a volcano, we expected that's a relatively small source compared to deformations of the seafloor that happen with great earthquakes. And so we would have expected, yeah, large waves could happen in the nearby area, but they should die out pretty fast going across the Pacific. And in fact, at the gauge at right there at Nuku'alofa, the size of the signal was not so big. It was around 1 meter amplitude. So we kind of figured, yeah, that's probably a problem in Tonga, but maybe not much of a problem outside of Tonga. And this is a model that was done showing what the tsunami might look like from if it was just caused right there at the volcano. And you can see it spreads out, but it kind of dies out as it goes across the Pacific. And actually, most of the energy is on the western side of the Tonga Ridge. The Tonga Ridge is where most of the islands of Tonga are located, and it has a depth of only a few hundred meters at most. And so it more or less acts as a wall for tsunami energy going to the east. And so you wouldn't expect much energy to cross over and go across to South America. But in fact, if we go to the next slide, after this event was over, in fact, all during the event, we kept being surprised by the size of the signals in different places. And in fact, the very largest signal we recorded for the entire event happened in Chile, that one right there at the bottom, 1.74 meters on a gauge in Chile. So this was violating our common sense about this. So now if we go to the next slide, and I hope you might be able to see this, it's going to happen kind of quick. So if you hit the enter button, Ardita, it should show the animation here. If you just like you're advancing the slide again. Oh, didn't work. Let's see. Well, okay, so I guess that's not going to work. Sometimes these animations don't work, but there was quite an atmospheric pressure signal generated by that very explosive eruption. And that atmospheric pressure signal went entirely around the world, and it's visible on this satellite image of water vapor, which you're not seeing, obviously. But take my word for it, there was quite a pressure signal going around the world, and it was even heard in places as far away as Alaska. So if we go to the next figure, you'll see the vicinity. There's the volcano and the main island of Tonga Tapu. And then there's the Tonga Ridge that I mentioned, and also the Tonga Trench, which is quite deep. Now, why would a pressure signal make any difference to a tsunami? It's because if the speed of this pressure signal is around the same speed as the tsunami wave, then it adds energy. It actually can generate tsunami waves. And for the Tonga Trench, which is very deep, tsunami waves travel at a very fast speed, and it's almost equivalent to the same speed that the pressure signal is going at. So if on the right-hand side there, you can see the atmospheric pressure wave is traveling at about 310 meters per second. And in that deep Tonga Trench, the speed of the tsunami is 328 meters per second. So they're almost equivalent there. So if we go to the next figure, you'll see if we remodel this tsunami, based on it being activated by the pressure signal, instead of the tsunami being big around the volcano and being reflected by the Tonga Ridge, it's actually mostly generated on the other side of the Tonga Ridge. And then you have a lot of energy going over towards South America. Well, these are facts that we have investigated and understood after the fact, but they're not things that were known by anyone really during the event. And so it highlights the challenges that are faced when you're trying to deal with a non-seismically generated tsunami, because all of our tools really are currently geared for the seismically generated tsunami. So if we go to the next slide, you'll just see from that particular model, it does fit the data fairly well. So you have the red lines on these plots are the time series from the model, and the black lines are the actual time series recorded, and these are all recorded on deep ocean gauges, but they match in time and roughly in amplitude. They're not exact matches, but it does a fairly reasonable job. So it makes us think that yes, this atmospheric pressure activation of the tsunami was probably responsible for a lot of the tsunami waves. So if we go to the next slide, just in summary here, we'll talk about all the challenges we have with non-seismic sources. Number one is that we don't have a rapid alert. With an earthquake source, any large earthquake will send seismic waves to nearby seismic stations, and we know within a minute or two, anywhere around the world, that a big earthquake has occurred. But with something like this, for example, that gauge, the tsunami waves didn't get there from the volcano until 15 or 20 minutes after the eruption. So that's kind of late. And then not only that, but if we hadn't known that was about that volcano, we wouldn't even known where the source was. We wouldn't have an idea. We'd have to figure that out later when tsunami signals arrived on more gauges. We also, for non-seismic sources, we don't have a good way to determine the source mechanism. Was it a flank collapse of the volcano? Was it a caldera collapse? Was it just a landslide somewhere? How much of a landslide was it? We don't know all those things like we do with earthquakes. And so it's hard for us to determine a source mechanism. And because of that, it's hard to create a forecast. You can't really create a forecast of a tsunami unless you know something, in fact, quite a bit about the source. So there's no forecast. Really, all you can do is right now is to report the observations you're seeing. And so, in fact, what that means in terms of disseminating to your customers is that you don't really have pre-scripted standard products. So I don't want to make this sound hopeless, but these are all the things that we need to work on as a tsunami warning system in order to be able to handle future events that are unknown to us right now, but we have to use our imagination and what we know about the Earth in order to sort of define that and work on these different aspects in order to provide better warnings in the future. So thank you very much, and I'll turn it back to Rick.
Okay. Thanks as always for your insights into this, and again sharing what we've learned from this. And there's a pathway ahead. There's certain things we can do now, and no doubt more science and more observations. There's more enhanced things we can do in the future, but this is the start, and thank you for sharing that. Okay, I'd like to put a big thank you to all our keynote presenters for sharing their most recent experiences with us. But again, given the resultant impact from the tsunami generated by this volcanic eruption, it's fantastic that so few casualties happen, but there's still a big recovery for Tonga to do. Now, I'd like to move on now. Like I said, we are getting behind in the timelines. We've got a few more individual speakers to come up now. I'd ask if you please get your presentations to about 9 minutes to see if we can pinch back some time. It's good to see there's a lot of discussions going on in the chat. Please keep that going. That's great to see. Okay, so the next speaker is Ms. Diana Patricia Mosquera-Carly, Deputy Chief, Regional Office, the Asia Pacific United Nations Office for Disaster Risk Reduction. And Diana Patricia, she'll help us remind us of the reasons why we're here, and that's to save lives and the agreed international frameworks we work under to achieve this. Over to you, Diana Patricia.
Thank you very much, Rick and colleagues. And for me, it's a great honor to participate in this event and to speak in the middle of so many known colleagues in the area of tsunami, and also to acknowledge all the work of Daniela, Ofa, and all the colleagues that work on the warning and response for the Tonga event. I will just maybe bring back some memories for all of us that have been working on disaster risk reduction for the last years. I think that you can, yes. And the question that I have been requested to try to answer is, what are the international frameworks drivers for reducing the risk of tsunamis? So if I may just bring us back, and many of us maybe will be getting some memories of this evolution, next please, on the last years of the tsunami, of the disaster risk reduction discourse. So if we want to go back to some years in this discourse, we can remember that the International Decade for Natural Disaster Risk Reduction started to put on the table the importance of focusing also on vulnerability and disaster risk reduction in addition to a hazard-oriented approach. And this was building in momentum through the different frameworks. And it's unfortunate to say, but it is important also to say that the tsunami in 24 was a very important catalyst of the implementation of policies and frameworks for disaster risk reduction at the global level and the regional level, motivated at that time by the Hyogo Framework for Action and then by the Sendai Framework. That is the framework that we are implementing until 2030, in line with the different other sustainable development processes. Next, please. In this sense, there has been 30 or more years of progress and achievements in the area of disaster risk reduction. And I must say that the tsunami community has enormously contributed to this with practical examples and with lessons learned from particular events, as we have been listening through the keynote presentations. And we must say that through these 30 years, there is a structured dialogue on disaster risk reduction from global to local. And there has been an increase of institutional structures on disaster risk management, dedicated structures by the government and identified focal points to manage and to treat disaster and disaster risk reduction as an important area of governmental work in the development arena. There are an increasing number of DRM policies, strategies, and plans and legislations, officialization of data, new actors and stakeholders that get increasingly involved in disaster risk reduction, and there is the guidance for implementation and innovative tools and instruments. So there is a high progress in governance, preparedness, and early warning systems, but of course it is also important to mention that there is low progress in addressing underlying factors of risk that are more of societal nature and part of the development process. Next. In this sense, let me just share some views on the contribution of the tsunami work and some ideas on exchanges of experiences with other communities that can be read through the lenses of the Sendai Framework for Disaster Risk Reduction, where the expected outcome is the substantial reduction of disaster risk and losses in lives and livelihoods and health and social and economic and other aspects of society. And this framework was adopted in, as mentioned, in 2015 within the framework of the SDGs and the Sustainable Development negotiations. There are different elements of the framework. I will maybe mention very quickly the 7 global targets and the 4 priorities of action. So there is also a guiding principles in terms of the involvement of different stakeholders and different components of the society, and also a very important component on international cooperation and global partnerships that I think the tsunami community is one of the examples of this. Next, please. So in terms of the priorities, as we might remember, and I see we have seen this several times, but it is an interesting framework to analyze some of the areas of work. The priority 1 aims at understanding disaster risk, and then accompanied by priority 2 in terms of strengthening disaster governance and manage disaster risk. Very important, the investment in disaster risk reduction and resilience, and then priority 4 in enhancing disaster preparedness for effective response, and Build Back Better, which is a complex concept, but is promoted also in the framework. In terms of priority 1, I think I might not add any element of what has been discussed before. It has been significant advances in hazard assessment and system for tsunami detection and warning and understanding tsunami risk, also in terms of the knowledge of the population in what a tsunami is and how to be prepared. And I think that's precisely the point of this webinar, that there is more research is still needed on some topics, such as the understanding of non-seismic tsunamis. So in terms of understanding risk, there has been an important progress and an important contribution of the tsunami community to priority 1 of the Sendai framework. And I must say it also, Arlito, please, next. That the tsunami community it's a very concrete example of disaster governance or risk governance better through the global coordination that is being ensured by the intergovernmental coordination groups. So there is a very concrete, and there are very concrete results on what intergovernmental coordination means and how it is applied for reducing risk and prepare communities through the involvement of member states and regional mechanisms, such as the regional early warning systems that have been established. And there is also a very important aspect of learning for the different areas of disaster risk reduction, which is the share of data and the use of this data for decision making and the elaboration of products that are aimed to inform the end user and the population on what to do and how to reduce risk and be prepared. So it is very interesting, and it will be very interesting, and it is done, and it's important to continue doing that the tsunami community shares these learnings with other disaster risk reduction practitioners in order to promote this establishment of a collaborative approach through member states for a common goal, in this case, in this particular case, tsunami preparedness, but it can be many other aspects of disaster risk reduction. In terms of the contribution to priority 3, of course, there has been increased investment in early warning system in the last years, particularly after the 24 tsunami, and investments in the structural mitigation measures. There might be some needs on additional investments in reinforced national structures and learning and address the underlying factors of risk. And I think this has been also mentioned by several colleagues that have talked before. And one very important aspect, and it was very nicely highlighted by Laura and the next presentation, is the importance of the preparation of the preparedness of the community and the knowledge that community must have in order to act as soon as possible, and sometimes even before a warning. So the Tsunami Ready program, and Bill was mentioning, we should have a 100% Tsunami Ready program in the communities, and I think that's a very important point, because that's the contribution that's the final objective of all these steps and SOPs and processes that are undertaken. That is also important to mention. It is also important to mention the wave exercises and the regularity and all the coordination and all the work that is done to prepare the different wave exercises and how different stakeholders are involved on a regular basis. I think if it is still every 2 years, but I don't remember exactly the regularity, but it's something, it's like an appointment that the tsunami community has to prepare, and this is a very good example also for other areas of disaster risk reduction. Community-based preparedness, public education and awareness, including the celebration or the commemoration of the World Tsunami Awareness Day, all the tsunami information centers, and of course, as is being done now and in different aspects, the post-event early warning performance studies on the post-tsunami assessment and other lessons learned experiences that are promoted after important events. I won't go into the Sendai framework targets, but it is important to mention that from Kyogo to Sendai, there has been an effort to also include some quantitative aspects of the impact of the disaster risk reduction work through the measurement of specific targets. And it is important that we continue getting this information on in terms of the reduction on mortality, affected people, the economic losses, damage to critical infrastructure, and other set of information in order to continue advocating for the importance of the different efforts that are being undertaken for reducing risk and prepare communities. This is just the targets in terms of the input targets of the Sendai framework in terms of the national and local disaster risk reduction and international cooperation. And just to close, I think in the disaster risk reduction discourse, we are more and more getting the sense that it is becoming, of course, it has always been, but it's becoming increasingly important to address the drivers of risk and to continue the interest also on high impact but low frequency events. So it is important with all the different hazards and the different drivers of risk that are increasingly affecting communities. It is very important to keep the discourse of continue preparing for extremely rare events, but when which impact can be very important for communities. So just to close this sharing of ideas with you, the last slide, this will, you can, I think this is, oh, you can just move to the next one, please. Thank you. It's important to continue discussing and to hearing from the different experts and experiences on how to reach that disaster risk reduction is a transformative agenda that we address the underlying factors of risk, but we continue working also on understanding risk and how to prepare communities. Very important, and this has been said, and I think this is the key message of this discussion, how to address intensive risk. A single event can erode years of development and efforts if not prepared properly. There is also the risk complexity and the different mix of risk management and how the different structures at the national level should work together to have the presence of this low frequency and high impact events also in national policies and investments, and how to precisely revisit public financing mechanisms to continue to ensure that all different scenarios are included in the national policies and regional policies as well. So I will leave it there, and I thank you again for the opportunity to hear what I have been hearing from the beginning, and to just be here with you today. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Diana, Patricia, and it's wonderful to have you here with us, and thank you for reminding us of these frameworks and also reviewing where we're at on this. And there's always more work to be done, and et cetera, and it's important we keep an eye on this and keep working our plans accordingly. So again, thank you very much for that. Our next speaker is Dr. Karyono from the National Earthquake and Tsunami Warning Center in Indonesia, the BMKG agency. He's going to talk to us about two devastating tsunamis that happened in Indonesia in 2018. So not that long ago still, but the lessons learned from there. So Karyono, so please over to you now, and please pay close attention to time here, 10 minutes maximum. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So, yeah. Good morning, everybody. So, first of all, I would like to say thank you very much for the organizing committee to invite me to share or to give short presentation today. My name is Karyono. I work in the Center for Earthquake and Tsunami Early Warning in BMKG, Indonesia. So today I would talk about the lesson learned from Palu, Donggala, and the Sunda Strait tsunamis. Next one, please. Yeah, I start with the Palu Donggala earthquakes happened in September 28, 2018. I mean, if we see in this left side, this is the distribution of the earthquakes in the Palu, and in general, the distribution of the epicenter is in line with the fault, local fault in the Palu. And in the left side, tell you about our processing system at the time that in the early stage of time, we can see here that our magnitude little bit overestimate at the time. Next one, please. Yeah, this is only for your information, the sequence of the Palu Donggala. We have actually the foreshock and then main shock and then followed by the aftershocks. So next, please. Yeah, based on the, as I said before, that at the time our magnitude calculation is a little bit overestimated, but based on that we have little bit lucky, but not lucky, but a little bit, because based on the situation, next one, please. Yeah, because on that overestimate magnitude, we, or in our tsunami modeling, could propose the tsunami estimation. It means that without overestimate, I think we never send out the information about the early warning, because for your information that time is running and then the actual data coming from the remote site, and then of course the magnitude still changing after and until we get the stable magnitude. Based on the stable magnitude, we don't, in our proposal, in our tsunami modeling, we don't have tsunami proposal anymore. But because of the situation, because of the overestimated magnitude in the early time, we are send out the information. I would say here bulletin number 1. Here we send out within 5 minutes after the origin time. And then next one, please. And then time is running, and based on our SOP also, our operator on duty at the time also issued the bulletin bar for TSP responsibility. As you know that Indonesian together with India, Australia is the tsunami provider for Indian Ocean members. So based on this, we issued the tsunami bulletin for TSP about 8 minutes after the origin time. Next one, please. Yeah, and then as I mentioned it before, that the magnitude is getting lower, and based on that, because we have no proposal anymore after several time, I mean several minutes, then our operator on duty looking for the sea level observation, and based on that sea level observation, we found, at least in Mamuju station here, we record the sea level about 6 centimeters, and sorry. And after that, next one, please. And also we check it in those modeling result proposed by the first parameter. As I said, over magnitude calculation, we also have the estimation time for Mamuju is about 1826. It's more or less similar with the observation arrival time. So based on that, next please. Based on that, based on the situation, based on observation data, actually BMKG again issued the final bulletin. Final bulletin is sent out about 34 minutes after the origin time. But as everybody know that in the time in between the origin time after the final one, the tsunami is hit the Palu. as everybody knows, that tsunami hit the Palu about 2 minutes after the origin time. It means that very fast. Even we send the information about bulletin number 1, but our bulletin number 1 is sent out within 5 minutes. Let's say in 5 minutes. But the tsunami actually hit the Palu within 2 minutes. It means that our tsunami warning is coming late. This is the situation at the time. But for sure that the cancellation time is done after the tsunami hit the Palu. Yeah, next one, please. Yeah, and the second, I would say about the Sunda Strait tsunami. At that time, or in this moment, BMKG task is mainly only provide the earthquake information and tsunami warning based on tectonic activity. But recently, we have the Sunda Strait tsunami that is caused by landslide or volcanic activity. This would be most interesting research in the future, of course. This is our challenge. So I would say also that BMKG at the time have no modeling tsunami hit by or caused by a landslide as well as the volcanic activity. So the challenge is how to judge the tsunami caused by a landslide and volcanic in as early as possible, let's say within 5 minutes. So how fast and precise the inference should be disseminated is also very important 2 things. Next, please. Yeah, regarding the Sunda Strait tsunami, this is only show you the situation in the operational room, what we have at the time. Our operational on duty, operator on duty, get the information about the Sunda Strait is late. I mean, it's about half until 1 hour after the tsunami. Based on that, the operator on duty getting information from the social media, and then try to look at the sea level observation close to this area. So based on that, our operator on duty again contact our DG, contact our boss, I would say, and then still looking for the possibility to have the anomaly or observation close to the Sunda Strait. Next, please. Yeah, this only also tell you about the situation in that time. Next, please. Yeah, as I said that case of Sunda Strait tsunami, we only rely on the observation of observed data of sea level. We can see here that some state gauge also record the tsunami, let's say in the Serang and as well as in the Banten tide gauges. So next, please. Yeah, also recorded in the west part of or eastern part of the Sumatra is also well record of the tsunami. It's about 0.36 meter in Kota Agung, and also in Pelabuhan Panjang record about 0.
1 minute, please.
Yes, next, please. Yeah, as yeah, for information that at the time our processing system is not well, detect automatic because the magnitude is so slow, because only I would say 3.4. So based on that, we are, as I said, do not know that the tsunamis happened in Sunda Strait at the time. Next, please. Yeah, based on that, we propose to have the SOP for the tsunami atypical event. Of course, there is still no tsunami model for that, so it means that we back to the service level 1. It means they only consist the qualitative information and plus the information about sea level observation. Next, please. Yeah, based on that, we conclude that the tsunami in Palu and the Sunda Strait are triggered by non-tectonic activity. The tsunami Palu triggered by a landslide, and also Sunda Strait triggered by the flank collapse. And currently we have no tsunami model for atypical, and then of course the tsunami warning caused by is very important. So based on that, we at least can learn the lesson learned from these two events is at least one is how to deal with the communication problem at the local area, and then also how to deal with the sea level observation, and how to deal with the modeling of atypical event to get more clear information. And also we have to deal with the continuously mitigation or education awareness to the local people. And the most important thing is how to recognize or characterize the atypical event. So the last one is would be the clear SOP should be set up, and it's very important. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Cariano. Thank you again for highlighting the challenges that we face and that we will take on. We will have to take these hurdles and build our capability as we go. But again, important to hear how another area, another ocean, another agency has been dealing with this. And I guess this is one thing we'd like to see comes out of this whole satellite activity is bringing all of that activity, research and development together. Okay, thank you once again, Cariano.
Yes.
Okay, our next presenter is Ms. Evelyn Garabiti, who's the Director General of the Ministry of Climate Change, Adaptation, Meteorology, Geohazards, Environment, Energy and Disaster Management. So Evelyn has a large portfolio there, but she's going to talk to us now about the volcanic tsunami risk in the Pacific Ocean. Over to you. Thank you, Evelyn. And the time is 10 minutes. I'll give you 1 minute. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Rick, and thank you for allowing me to present it in this forum. So I'm going to talk about the risk in other for volcano-generated tsunami in other Pacific islands. So I'll talk. Next slide, please. Just a reminder again on the Ring of Fire. The Pacific is surrounded by the Ring of Fire, with over 800 volcanoes on the Ring of Fire, and out of the 800 volcanoes, 400 to 500 volcanoes in Asia and the Pacific, including submarine volcanoes. And in the Southwest Pacific, submarine volcanoes in Tonga and Vanuatu. So tsunamis can be generated by phreatic eruptions and also volcanic landslides. For phreatic eruptions, we can have wider tsunami inundation, that's what happened in Tonga, but for volcanic landslides, sometimes it's more localized tsunami generated, especially for aerial volcanoes landslide. Next slide. I will discuss more about the volcano in Vanuatu. As you have seen in my previous maps, Vanuatu have 3 active submarine volcanoes at the moment, one in the south, but I'll talk more especially the 2 volcanoes in the central, and particularly the Kauai eruption that happened 1452 after decades. So this volcano is located between the islands of Epi and Tonga on intershaped islands. It is roughly 12 by 6 kilometer depression separating Epi from Tonga. Looking at the volcanic records, multiple generations of activity are centered around the depression, including hydromagmatic basaltic eruptions. Some large dacitic and paraclastic flows happened in the past. And on the northeastern side of the depressions is a small basaltic cone called Karua. So there are a few works. Eruption happened in 1452, so at the time there's no much technology, no much records by photos that we can that I can show you. But some works have been done by Mosier and other geologists in the past, Robin and others in 1994 claimed that an eruption that produced 39 up to 39 cubic kilometer of erupted materials occur at Kauai at the time, where a caldera was produced that separated EP from Tongoa, and the caldera flow itself dropped somewhere 650 to 1,100 meters, and its overall size put as seventh largest caldera eruption in the last 10,000 years. Recent research has also pointed to the Kauai eruption as a possible source to high elevated paleo-tsunami deposits in the far north of New Zealand, along the coast of Futuna Island, in the Wallis and Futuna archipelago, at the pieces of potentially evidence from the mid-South Pacific point to this volcanogenic tsunami have been significant region-wide event. We do not, however, know whether the tsunami was a large enough event to affect the remainder of the South Pacific, as might be the case. But the recent research outlined evidence from the key sites in Vanuatu, New Zealand, and Futuna Islands, and provide information from the potential relevant locations within the South Pacific. So this provides a picture of potential effects of the tsunami to the east and the south of Kauai caldera. Most proximal paleo-tsunami site in Vanuatu is also one of the smallest reported, both in elevation above sea level and thickness. So the most compelling find on Tongoa is the palm tree wrapped on the top of a bed of pumice. The tree and rafted pumice form the upper layers of a paleo-tsunami deposit, approximately 40 centimeter thick. And the lower portion consists of a sequence of small pebble and gravel finding upwards to a fine sand. This proximal deposit contrasts markedly with those supported to relate to the Kauai eruption. So geologists have used a variety of clues to deduce how it may have formed. And interestingly, one of the primary sources of information is anthropologic. Stories exist of the destruction of Kauai Island. So it is believed to be one island that is called Kauai, and it was destroyed by the mega eruption in 1452, leaving the caldera of 12 by 6 kilometer wide that is lying there at the moment. And the land felt, that's according to the stories that have been collected, that the land felt the strong earthquakes, tsunami inundated the neighboring islands, and the islands itself tilted and collapsed during a great eruption. Some people living on the island died, but many were able to flee to Efate Islands to the south before the island disappeared. These people were able to resettle the now separated Tonga Island with 6 years of dramatic events. Along with that, global climatic effects were observed in the middle 1453 to 1454, including a non-stop snow in China, consisting of 40 days of snow south of the Yangtze River, and dry fog in Turkey during April and May 1453. So the three ring records shows these records are linked to that mega eruption in 1452 in Kauai. So a study by Plummer and others in 2012 looked at the low dome ice core record from Antarctica. Even suggests that the sulfur spike seen in the 1450s may be two eruptions, one in the 1453, the other one in 1458. They say that care must be taken in attributing the sulfur spike and climate effects in the 1450s to Kauai, as the data is far from conclusive that they are linked. So it is then believed that the overall size, as I said earlier, put it as the largest caldera eruption in the last 10,000 years, and have been assigned volcanic explosivity index of 7, and as such is believed to have been larger than the 1815 after decade Tambora eruption, with a minimum 100 cubic kilometer produce of pyroclastic deposits, and an eruptive mass of 1 by 1014 kilo.
1 minute, please.
Next slide. So with the event that occurred, that's my last slide, the event that occurred in Hawaii way back have been researched and is continuing to be researched. But we have the current lessons that we are learning from the Tonga for the volcanic eruption recently. Will need to be continue to thoroughly research and to be better understood to predict future events that can happen to help us. So for Vanuatu, at the moment, we are 500 years after the last eruption of Hawaii. So the government is taking it seriously to better equip the Shepherd Islands volcanoes again. And another initiative that is coming up is the project on submarine smart cable that is coming up and should be operational by 2024. Some of the initiatives that can help us to monitor our submarine volcanoes. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Lynn, and thank you again for showing us how understanding the past and the history is so important as well, and now trying to bring that together with what we're learning in more recent times from the Tonga volcanic eruption. Thank you again for sharing your time and your experience. Our next speaker is Dr. Raphael Paris, a geologist in CNRS in France. And Raphael's been keeping a watching brief on volcanoes all around the world. He's going to share his experiences with us. Thank you, Raphael. 10 minutes, and I'll give you a 1 minute announcement just before the end. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. I'm sorry it's a little bit dark here, but actually it's night. So I'm going to present you some facts on the different types and events of volcano-generated tsunami we can have in all other ocean basins. Next slide, please. So the activity and instability of volcanoes can produce tsunamis, so-called volcanic tsunami. And there exist different types of source mechanisms which were identified from past events. So we have different kinds of landslide, submarine landslide, subaerial landslide. We also have the pyroclastic flows, which is a specificity of explosive eruptions, caldera collapse, underwater explosions, volcanic earthquakes, and blasts with pressure waves as occurred during the Hunga-Hapai eruption recently. So I will not enter into details on these different types of volcanic tsunami here because it will be the aim of my talk tomorrow. So next slide, please. So this is a map of the volcanic tsunamis that were recorded during history. So as you can see, the great majority of these events are located on the western part of the Pacific Basin, and most particularly in southeastern Asia. And we also have some events in the Caribbean and in the Mediterranean basins. Next. So in the framework of a task team on atypical tsunami sources, which was led by François Chindéry, we recently reported on the conclusions we can make from the recent events, and we also reviewed these atypical tsunami sources, their parameters, both seismic and non-seismic events. And we draw a current state of the art relating to the monitoring and the warning for such events. And we also provided some guidance and recommendation for the member states. And the reports also provides a preliminary list of around 50 potentially tsunami-genic volcanoes around the world. And this list was defined following these criteria. So the volcano is currently active or was active during the 20th or 21st century. And it belongs to one of these 4 types of volcanic edifices. The first type is a steep-flanked stratovolcano with the main eruptive center located less than 6 kilometers from the sea or from the lake, with the example of Stromboli, for instance, or Montserrat. The second one is a complex of eruptive centers in a submerged caldera. So it can be a caldera lake like Taha in the Philippines, or a caldera open to the sea, like Krakatoa or Rabaul in Papua New Guinea. It can be also a submarine volcano, like in Tonga or Kikengeni in the Antilles. And then the last type is the ocean shield volcano with evidence of flank deformation. Next. So I will not talk too much on the Pacific because it's not the aim of this talk. I will focus on the other basin, but just to as mentioned, Esleen, the Pacific Ring of Fire hosts many volcanoes that are potentially tsunami-genic. And finally, all types of volcanic edifices are represented here in the Pacific. So this is the basin target number 1. And as you can see on this map, all the volcanoes in red are the volcanoes that appear on our preliminary list. So they have to be considered on the scenarios implemented in SOP soon, or in a few years if we can. And then I added in orange secondary volcanic areas, which are not in the list, with a very low probability for tsunami hazard, but not a probability of 0. Next. So in the Indian Ocean basin, we have identified 3 volcanoes that could generate both local or regional tsunamis. The first one, of course, is the Anak Krakatoa, which is very active in Sunda Strait, and with 2 major events, one in 1883 with both a local tsunami in the Sunda Strait generated by pyroclastic flows, and the worldwide volcano meteorological tsunami has occurred recently in Tonga. And we also have, of course, the 2018 flank collapse. Then we have Barren Island volcano in the Andaman Islands in India, which is frequently active and emerging from the Andaman Sea. And it could become tsunami-genic in the case of explosive activity. And the third one is in Piton-la-Fournaise in Réunion Island, French island, which is an ocean shield volcano showing evidence of flank instability. And a long time ago, 4.5 thousand years ago, the large part of the eastern flank of the volcano collapsed and generated a large tsunami on the islands around. Next. In the Northeast Atlantic Basin, we have a low probability of volcanic tsunami, but there are some local tsunami sources that should not be neglected, as for instance in Iceland, where there are some submarine eruptions of fractomagmatic style that could generate small tsunamis. And there is also a non-negligible hazard of cliff collapse in the highlands and volcanic islands in the Atlantic. Just one remark on, yes, one remark on the ocean islands and the streets of regional tsunami generated by flank collapse. It's a very high magnitude but very low recurrence events. and there is no present-day evidence of large-scale stability of these ocean islands. Next, please. In the South Atlantic Basin, we have also volcanic provinces that are active with at least 12 volcanoes which were active during the 20th and 21st centuries. But there is no documented volcanic tsunami during the 3 last centuries, so it's difficult to estimate the probability for volcanic tsunami in this area, but it is probably very low. Next, please. In the Caribbean Basin, we have 4 different volcanoes that could generate tsunami. The Soufrière Hills in Montserrat, of course, but also Mont Pelé in Martinique, which is actually at a yellow level due to a strong unrest since December 2020. Also the Soufrière of Saint-Vincent, which was active with the last eruption in 2020, and a new sea level station was installed in February of this year. And also we have the Kikemjeni submarine volcano on the list. Next one. So in the Caribbean, we had an expert meeting in 2019, and we provided documents such as a list of active volcanoes in the Antilles, a list of past volcanic tsunami events. Next one. And also we provided some scenarios of volcanic and landslide tsunamis, and one of these scenarios was already added to the CATSAM database. And we also have a task team on tsunami procedures for volcanic crises since 2016. Next. So last, in the Mediterranean basin, we also have some volcanoes that could represent a threat in terms of volcanic tsunami. We have the Vulcano in Italy, which is in strong unrest since November of last year. And of course, Stromboli. The interesting fact with Stromboli is that it hosts a local warning system that is specifically designed for volcanic tsunami, and we will have tomorrow a presentation on that. And in Greece, also there are two volcanoes, Santorini volcano, and the Colombo submarine volcano close to Santorini with major explosive eruption in 1650 and a major tsunami. Next. So the conclusion is that in all ocean basins, we have potentially tsunamigenic volcanoes, but the Pacific Basin and its adjacent seas is far more exposed to than the other basins. In the Atlantic, the probability for volcanic tsunami is low, especially in the South Basin. However, local tsunami generated by the volcanic activity and cliff collapse should be considered, and we must have communication with the institutes in charge of the monitoring of these volcanoes. And in the Caribbean and Mediterranean, the threat is non-negligible. It's lower than in the Pacific, but higher than in the Atlantic. And if we look at the Caribbean, we had 10 volcanic tsunami during the 2 last centuries that caused no fatalities, but this is a sign not to be taken lightly, I think. In the Mediterranean, volcanic tsunami occurred in Italy and Greece volcanoes, and as I mentioned, Italy has the most sophisticated local tsunami warning system designed to deal with this volcanic tsunami hazard at Stromboli. There are discussions on other volcanoes currently. And in Greece, the Hellenic Geological Survey launches recently a new project to improve quantitative hazard and risk assessment, including volcanic hazard. So these are interesting initiatives for us. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Raphael. Thank you for sharing with us, and particularly in the middle of the night over there in Paris. It's much appreciated. But this is risk assessments, a foundation of all warning and mitigation systems, is understanding where these risks exist, and this catalogue that you've been developing will be so important to guiding our future plans and directions. So thank you again. Okay, moving along now, our next speaker is Dr. Hakunti Rahayu, a faculty member in the Bandung Institute of Technology in Indonesia, and also Dr. Rahayu is the chair of the task team on disaster management preparedness and has been heavily involved in community awareness and response aspects of tsunami warnings and mitigation. And not to forget, our goal for the tsunami program of the UN Ocean Decade is to have 100% of our at-risk coastal communities tsunami ready. It's a big task to do, but it's obviously a fundamentally important one. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Parik. While waiting for Pak Ardhito, thank you, Pak Ardhito. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody. And we have to remember that prior to 2004 Indian Ocean tsunami event, actually local and indigenous knowledge is a common way of life of most of the community. And this knowledge actually also has been regarded as inferior to science and technology, which has affected the recognition of the indigenous knowledge in academic literatures. Many best practices that will be presented in this presentation will remain at the elder generation, which may be gone by the time. And also to contrast, new best practices emerge during non-tectonic tsunami will be potentially gone too if we didn't do anything. Even those Sendai Framework Disaster of Risk Reduction 2015-2013 currently include the significant role of indigenous knowledge to reduce the impact of disaster risk and protect life, but the question still remains the sustainability of this indigenous knowledge is part of the community way of life. With the complexity of this non-seismic tsunami presented by previous speaker, what have we learned from the local indigenous knowledge with this previous event? I would like to highlight the presentation covering the 4 points. The first one is what is the local and indigenous knowledge. Second one, what has been learned from tectonic tsunami, especially 2004 Indian Ocean tsunami and 2006 and 2007 events, and also what has been learned from the non-tectonic tsunami from the case of Sunda Strait tsunami. And last but not least, I would like to highlight the discussion on the issue, challenges, and solution for the local and indigenous knowledge itself. Next, please. So we have to understand here that the local indigenous knowledge, as I mentioned before, is the community way of life. Basically, from the academic perspective, indigenous knowledge refers to the method and practice developed by a group of people from an advanced understanding of the local environment, which has formed over numerous generations of habitation and originating within the community, maintaining a non-formal means of dissemination, collective own, developed over several generations and subject to adaptation and embedded in communities' ways of life as a means of survival as well as building resilience. Indigenous practice and strategy embedded not only in the knowledge, which prove valuable against natural disaster, but also can be transferred and adapted to other communities in similar situations. Next, please. So in this next part, I would like to focus on the phenomena of the 2004 Indian Ocean tsunami, where indigenous knowledge is play important role. This 2004 ocean tsunami actually is not only become a wake-up call for the emerging of the tsunami early warning system, but also this is also a wake-up call for all of us to understand about the importance of the local and indigenous knowledge. Most people are not really ready to respond to tsunami disaster due to the lack, due to the lack of knowledge to what is tsunami and its natural warning sign, lack of knowledge and capacity to respond disaster, except for the people from Moken Sea nomad from Mergui and Surin Island, from Myanmar and Thailand, and also Mentawaian people from Simelu, Nias, and Siberut Island of Aceh and North Sumatra province, Indonesia. Most of these coastal people just standing amazed with the immediate receding sea water following the low shaking, hypnotized by seeing a lot of fish floundering on the sand, with low understanding toward the devastated tsunami threat that might come after the strong earthquake. They just flocking to collect the fish, which they thought present as a present from the nature. Not only that, people also had a lack of understanding toward animal behavior, toward the changing of the nature prior to tsunami arrival, such as cattle were getting louder, massive flying bird coming from the sea, and also I understand that animals have a very high sensitivity toward the changing of the nature itself. Next, please. And then to discuss about the indigenous knowledge from the Moken Sea nomad in Thailand and Myanmar, we understand here that Moken is the sea nomad which is living in the archipelago of Andaman Sea, about 2,000 Moken in the Mergui, Myanmar, and 800 Moken living in the Surin Island in Thailand. The way they live here, is in the boat houses. They are moving from one island to another island in surrounding the archipelago of the Andaman Sea, for example, Mergui and Surin. And also by 2004, India's tsunami has proven that all Moken family were safe due to the local and indigenous knowledge, what we call here labun, which is recognized as a giant wave or tsunami, which is they understood that this giant wave which is also called the seven rollers, which is come with this seven high wave, and it's believed occurring in the every 2 generation part of the cleansing the sea. During the event, some elderly noticed the changing of the sea, water receding at the coastal very fast, and they shout about labun. And then automatically the whole family of this Moken family, they run to the higher ground to save their life. The issue here that the knowledge of labun only embedded in the elderly generation mind. What happened the next and the next generation? Will it be sustained due to the modernization in this region? Next, please. And then here I would like to share related from the indigenous and local knowledge from Indonesia, still due to the tectonic tsunami. Smong. The story of Smong actually resonates within the Simelu people, and the story has been carried out as the traditional storytelling and lullaby. The story originally was starting from the earthquake back to 1907, which has happened on January 4th. With the 7.6 magnitude, the earthquake has developed a giant wave, which is reached about 70% of the population Simulian in the Simelu alien was killed. And then this gives them the big lesson of learn, because that happens on Friday where people was gathering for Friday praying. So the worst impact of this 1907 tsunami actually has its pain and resonate in the heart of the Simelu people. The survivor try to deal with the disaster by recounting the story of Smong. So also we has been proof that the Smong as the indigenous knowledge of the Simulian is very important, because during 2004 Indian Ocean tsunami, which has happened also on the holiday in Sunday, the Smong story successfully alert the Simulian people in impending dangers, and they ran away from the coastal to the higher places. The great story Smong is practically example of indigenous knowledge in disaster of reduction. You can see here only 3 people were killed from the 78,000 people live in the Simelu Island. This 5 stanza of the poetry Smong actually is telling about the story of the sinking village due to the earthquake, and then telling the characteristic of tectonic tsunami, and also provide instruction for what to do and respond to evacuate if the sign of tsunami identified, and requesting always to remember the instruction and advise live harmony with disaster by building resilience. There is also, we understand here, this is a question that we need to highlight as part of lesson learned from Smong. We can understand here that only elderly generation in the Simelu Island, which is understand about the Smong, and they need also to carry out to the next generation. And also there is another fact. There are 6 million people who live outside the island actually have been found among the dead during 2004 tsunami. The question here, how to keep the sustainability of these indigenous knowledge of smog become very important. Next, please. The next issue here, we learn still from the Mentawai Island people. This is the next island, is Nias. Nias has been strongly affected not only by 2000 earthquake and tsunami 2004, which has killed 140 villagers and rendered 100 homeless. But also this island actually has been stricken by 2005 a tsunami, which has happened on the 20th of March with the 8.7 magnitude of the earthquake. This is actually have a very devastated impact, not only losing about 8,400 people, but also the impact of the earthquake. You can see as physically that the island has been uplifted about 2 meters and exposing coral reef and other area as much as 100 meters seaward. The earthquake affected about 90% of population, 44,000 damaged houses, and then about 29,000 is needed a reconstruction. Amidst the devastation, a solid example emerged how indigenous practice can reduce impact of disaster. After the earthquake, most of the few remaining traditional wood houses had resisted the impact of the earthquake. This is very important how we can see the field engineering is still considered to be the most effective example, a try to test earthquake resistant architecture on Nias Island. Lesson learned, firstly, that isolated example of indigenous alone cannot contribute significantly to disaster risk. Second, this also demonstrates that traditional giving up in the favor of modern community can be left exposed to the risk of disaster. Modernization has played a big part in the rapidly disappearing traditional architecture of Nias, and also the situation about the scarcity of the hardwood, which is the mainly construction material needed for these traditional houses, is also very difficult. That's why, as consequence, many of method technique used to build traditional houses are slowly become forgotten and replaced by the bricks and other construction material. Next, please. And then this is one more thing. Okay, so I just skip this one because you understand Siberut also have similar situation. But the most important that I would like to highlight here, that the indigenous knowledge of the Siberut, they have left the houses when they felt the strong earthquake. And also there is indigenous knowledge about how they understood about the earthquake with the Sigagu and Tetu, which is how they can respect the phenomena of the nature related with the disaster. Next, please. So the second part, the third part here that I would like to focus on the Indian Ocean, on the tsunami, Sunda Strait tsunami observation. Here that Sunda Strait tsunami is a non-tectonic phenomena, the collapse of the caldera flank, and everybody has been discussed this in the previous presentation. The event occurred on the 22 December, which is the beginning of the end year of holiday. Banten province is famous with the tourist destination spot, also has been dedicated as super tourist destination, such as special tourism area KIK Tanjung Lesung, based on the presidential decree. The tsunami actually has been stricken, not only the tourism area, but also residential area, especially the remote settlement in Ujung Koleon reservation area, which is famous with the rhino. Amidst the devastation of the solid example emerged how indigenous practice can reduce the impact of disaster, well shown in the next slide. So we are starting from city to city, but I just capture a few that is really needed. For example, here, Carita is one of the resort, and you can see here among of the survivor, this is some group of the middle school students saved by the tsunami signage, even though they never participate in tsunami exercise. Next, please. And then here on the Tanjung Lesung, which is a very special economic zone dedicated by presidential decree on 2015, that we can see here is about almost 200 people died, including this the boys' band performance. The sound of the concert was louder, and the tsunami wave cannot be clearly captured by all the people. So this is according to testimony of the survivor. And survivor also saw phenomena of the high wave with turbojet plane sound. Next, please. So another here, this is very interesting here, Dadaplango. This is a very remote area where survivor head of a neighborhood heard that the sound of the airplane were very close and very low and close to the land. And suddenly they see to the sea area, and they saw white wall moving toward the land. And they just, without any doubt, they just run and then try to escape, even though there is no tsunami sign there, but they are safe because of their instinct. Next, please. And then this is last experience here on the Ujung Jaya, which is the very remote area, is in the part of Ujung Kulon National Park. Heavily damaged, most of the houses using poorly timber structure, and the fatality is quite high also in this region. Several survivors actually they managed here to escape because after seeing natural phenomena, what they call crocodile dancing, and then from the sea, full moon make the clear vicinity about this animal behavior or the mystical phenomena. So to conclude, I would like to cover here, next please, Pak Ardhito, related with the issue, challenge, and also the solution. There are two solutions here.
If we could wrap up soon, please.
Yeah, so this is my last slide. Yeah. Okay, so this is like the importance of mainstreaming on the local indigenous knowledge. Local and indigenous knowledge is collectively owned, developed over several generations, and subject to adaptation, embedded, and so on. And most of local and indigenous knowledge remains at the elder generation, which may be gone by time. And some new local indigenous knowledge that we learn from the Sunda Strait tsunami actually have potential gone easily if we don't have the framework to mainstream this into the formal planning, policy, regulation, as well as education. Last but not least, also the current knowledge on the importance of tsunami signage also actually is become very important part of the local and indigenous knowledge because it shows they're saving the people. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Terima kasih.
Yeah, sama-sama.
Okay, thank you for that. Yeah, look, the knowledge, the community knowledge, the passing down of that knowledge we find so many times is so important, particularly for these rare events. And so it's important to have these mechanisms. So we've got a lot to learn still from this type of activity. So thank you very much for sharing that with us. Our next speaker is Dr. Yulong Miao. He's the co-director of the Joint Australian Tsunami Warning Centre. And he's going to tell us about a national warning in response to the recent Tongan event. Thank you, Yulong.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks for having me. Slide, please. Yeah, so I will share with you an Australian experience in how we managed our national warning response in that Tonga event. And noting that I represent Joint Australian Tsunami Warning Centre, which is the partnership between Bureau of Meteorology and the Geoscience Australia. Thank you. Next, please. JTWC, that's the acronym. We actually have a very basic standard operating procedures in place before the event for volcanic events. And we also have a system in place for disseminating those products. And the way we do it, as I said, it's very basic, is the first to assign a volcanic explosive index, which and then we monitor the tsunami observations. And then based on those two things, we'll decide threat areas within the predefined, lookup table kind of a tsunami travel time isochron. And but we paid specific emphasis saying that the warning strategy has to be adjusted as needed, depending on the situation, evolving situation. So in terms of how we assign what we call a VEI, volcanic explosive index, you saw that the table on the right. It's really based on the advice we received from Volcanic Ash Advisory Center. In Melbourne, we have one for the region, but the one that Tonga eruption occurred was actually falling into the Volcanic Ash Advisory Center in Wellington. So they are regional centers. So that actually was the responsibility of Wellington. And they do that by assessing the satellite imageries for any any signs of stratospheric injection of the volcanic ash plume. And yeah, and it's really basic, and it really relies heavily on their intelligence. And let's say if it's less than 3, anything between 1 and 2, and that index would say, okay, that could mean that there's a little, very little stratospheric injection. But if you spot some of that from satellite, then you assign anything between 3 or 4, and that's in yellow color. And then if it's a major significant ones, like what we had in Tonga, that will be 5 or above. So, but there's a caution here, that index itself should not be used alone for assessing threat. And as we know, that tsunami can be generated from smaller eruptions, and it may not be detected at all if it's an undersea volcanic eruption. So that's next, please. Yeah, so what we got here is a very simple lookup table. It's using the combination of VEI and tsunami observations. So let's say if it's less than 3, and if there's no tsunami detected, then there's no threat area to worry about. So new. But if there is some marine threat kind of observations detected from a tidal gauge or eyewitness, then anything that's within the 1 hour R would be considered as under threat. And moving up, if a VEI is between 3 and 4, then we would assume that the threat is within the 3 hours. There's potential for tsunami, threat within 3 hours R. But we then look at whether tsunami has been generated, and if it's not generated, then we still issue warning, but it's a marine threat warning. But we will watch closely for early cancellation. But if we did it, if there was a marine threat kind of observation, then yeah, this confirms that this strategy works. But if the observation is larger, then it is a bit judgment call here, and we could consider expanding the 3 hour R to be even up to 6 hours. And obviously, if the index is much greater, like a 5 above, and the threat area we cover is within 6 hours R. But it's also looking at the observations, and depending on the observation, we might have to expand the area under threat. So, as I said, it's a bit of judgment call here. Next, please. So how do we apply that SOP in this Tonga event? And I thought we did reasonably well in the end, but not initially. So the table on the left is the timeline-based event, and how what happened, and how the JTWC responded. And to the right, just top right is the map which showing the eventual threat assessment for Australia, and the star is where the volcanic eruption is, and those lines are just the isochrones, with just equal tsunami travel times. And you can tell that Norfolk Island, that's our furthest east offshore island of Australia, it's just outside 3 hour isochrone. And the next closest one was Lord Howe Island in red. That's around 4 hours, around 5 hours isochrone. And then the mainland along the east coast is around 6 hours isochrone to up to 7 hours. And so in the end, what we did is Norfolk and Lord Howe was under land inundation warning, and the majority of east coast from south of Queensland all the way to Tasmania was under marine threat. And also the Macquarie Island which is to the south, it's also under marine threat, which is a part of the Antarctic. And there were observations from Norfolk showing island showing 1.27 meters, and Gold Coast, which is just on the border between Queensland and New South Wales, is received around 82 centimeters.
1 minute, please. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So essentially, the judgment call is applied. Initially, we thought there was no threat because we thought it's the volcanic ash advisory suggesting it's a lesser stratospheric intrusion, and so set it as 3 or 4. And so we thought, okay, 3 hours might be enough. And later on, we reversed up gradually given the received observations. So yeah, and also just ramping things up, and so eventually we settled at around 7 hours isochrone for issuing warnings, and the whole operation lasted for around 30 hours, and eventually got cancelled. And so next, please. This is my last slide, which just to highlight some of the learnings. So what went well? We do have a fairly basic SOPs and the system in place to handle volcanic tsunami sources. And we are fortunate to have access to the advice from volcanic ash advisory centers, but noting that their initial one was a bit underestimated. And we do have experts who originally developed those SOPs. Some of them are online today. Were activated, and they also led this long and complex operation, which helped navigating all the very changing and challenging situations. What can be improved? We'd like to see a more automated sea level alerting algorithm to be used to ease the workload. And we did a very good sea level monitoring, but this algorithm is not there. Would have helped, and it's currently being considered to be developed. And this early shockwave has really caused some confusion, and because it's smaller and it came up faster than what we thought, and it contributed to our initial sense of no threat assessment. And the New Zealand data buoy has been showing very useful, but it was not available directly in our system, but now it is. So as I speak, and it's just being implemented, which is great, thanks to New Zealand. And we should really, there's no model guidance specific to the event. And I think we should work really together nationally, internationally to collaborate on this modeling. So that's my talk, thanks.
Fantastic, thank you, Yulong. Thank you for sharing that. Some developments at the national level, putting some new SOPs, thankfully, but sadly too, perhaps into practice for an event like this to see how that goes. And look forward to people like the JTWC and all these other centres continuing to work together to improve these procedures, and where we get information from. Looking at the chats there, we've got people again supporting Earthland and saying yes, we need some some intergovernmental frameworks about the volcanic monitoring type programs. So hopefully we can bring all of this together. Okay, we'd like to move on now. I'm conscious we've formally come to our end time, but I hope you'll bear with us, and if you could hang on, we can see we've got a large number of participants still engaged. We'd like to go for around half an hour to have David Katsia's presentation next, and I really want to have some part of the discussion panel, and I hope all the panelists can stay on for us. Let's move to David Katsia. David has been heavily involved in the ISC Tsunami program, also from the disaster management and preparedness side of things. Yes, so David, over to you, please.
Thank you, Chair, and yes, thank you also for the invitation to present to this event. I'm going to share some thoughts from an emergency management perspective. We've heard a lot about the science side today. So I've also shared views with my colleagues in the National Emergency Management Agency. So what I'm presenting is our collective effort. I also want to recognize the challenges or points made specifically by Laura and Chip earlier on today. You will see some of their reflections also in my presentation. However, I'll try to delve a little bit deeper into some of those matters. So let's get underway. First slide, please. So I think I'd like to talk firstly about challenges to emergency managers, and then secondly, I'll talk about challenges with regards to the community. Now, from the emergency manager's perspective, it's all for us, it is all about adequate information and data for both planning and response. So I've divided up into before, close to, and during an event there. Before an event, what I mean is that risk information, in other words, the likelihood and consequences, rather than merely the probability of a hazard, specifically non-seismic hazards in this context, is really important. That enables us as emergency managers to plan and also to develop a public education from. So that's the preparedness side, understanding the risk from a likelihood and consequence perspective. But even more important, close to the event, this same type of information is critical. And there we start to refer to impact-based warnings or threat information, or at least an indication of the size or scale of the potential hazard. For example, in a volcanic eruption, the expected size and scale of an eruption, instead of merely an eruption is possible. And this, again, is to support our appreciation of the extent of the potential impact, which in turn, of course, help us to prepare and decide on the content and type of warnings and public advice to be issued. And then during the event, and as we have heard here quite a bit about the typical tools to our in our toolbox are not applicable here. For example, source modeling. So we suggest that the threat assessment be based on observational detection and forecasting rather than source modeling. Source modeling, of course, where it's possible, but recognizing that there's probably going to be an absence of that. So observational detection and forecasting seems to be the way to go. And I've just singled out two examples there. Of course, the DART observations, as we have noted, were critical. For example, with our DART observations, the Hunga Tonga Hunga Hapai tsunami may well have arrived unheralded. But also something that I think deserves a bit more thinking and a look at is remote sensing of satellites. those observations are critical not only for the threat information during the event, but also in a wider context can support the observation of human behavior. And this is important for social scientists before, during, and after event in the development of dynamic population exposure or vulnerability models, for instance. I've also seen in the chat a suggestion that infrasound sensors can be looked at. So there's another one. So I think we need to delve a little bit deeper into the observational capabilities at our disposal. So those deal with the emergency managers. Next slide, please. Next slide. There we go. So let's look at challenges for communities. And I think here the key question that we need to look at is, what is an appropriate level of understanding required from our communities with regards to these non-seismic sources? And the first question is, can we expect our communities to learn all the sources of tsunami and their respective nuances? And I'd suggest probably not. I don't think that's a fair expectation. Merely understanding that tsunamis are not only caused by earthquakes and that their behavior may be different and that there are things we still don't know is probably sufficient from the public's understanding as that goes. So the key awareness, as has been pointed out, is of course natural warnings, about natural warnings, and specifically to act on observations of, I'd suggest, unusual sea behavior and or a big boom or a shock wave, even when there is no long or strong shaking. So this is the challenge, that the typical felt signs or observations that we tend to refer to may not all be applicable. And so it seems to me that the emphasis must be on the unusual sea behavior, and we can add the shockwave or big boom to the potential observations. And then that suggests that we need to spend some time on education on what these look like or what they feel like. What do we mean by unusual sea behavior in this context? And what do we mean by a big boom or shockwave? Most people would not have experienced those. And then, of course, critical, as far as possible, we should always attempt to tailor our approach to the local context, which is different from one place to the next, and involve our local communities in this process to get them managing their own risk as far as possible. Next slide. So we've had several references to Tsunami Ready, and I want to suggest that Tsunami Ready is probably one of the first tools that we already have that can assist in addressing these challenges. We do have a separate session about Tsunami Ready tomorrow, so don't want to spend time on explaining too much about that. Suffice to say that Tsunami Ready has been piloted across the world since 2016, and we expect to be recognized as a formal IOC program this year. Now, it is based on 12 key performance indicators that you see to the left there: mitigation, preparedness, and response. And I'd summarize those as 3 categories: understanding the hazard and risk, community awareness, and planning and capacity. So in those 3 contexts, we can apply this tool to help us with the non-seismic sources as well. And I'll show you how in the next slide, please. So this goes a little bit deeper into the key performance indicators. And I've signaled out 4 of those specific indicators that can help. In the mitigation part, we have an indicator that's described as have a public display of tsunami information. So we can look at including potential non-seismic sources in that information. Under the preparedness category, the second indicator is outreach and public awareness education materials are developed and distributed. So these can include examples of non-seismic sources and information about what unusual sea behavior in a big boom or shockwave may look like. And the same can apply to the third preparedness indicator, which is about hold at least 3 outreach or educational activities annually. Again, we can include those same examples and information in those. And then finally, thank you. This is my last slide. Finally, in the response category, the first indicator is to have tsunami emergency operation plans, and this is where the hazard or risk information will be useful. And so I'm suggesting to include a risk of non-seismic sources in hazard descriptions to ensure planning and policy takes these into account. So the challenge would be for our tsunami ready boards or evaluators to check for these inclusions. But also in countries or areas where tsunami ready are not applied, I'd suggest that these areas are examples that could be focused on. Thank you, Chair. That's all I had on how we can prepare our communities better.
Okay, thank you, David. No, again, some important issues you've raised there about looking towards impact type warning, so that the responders, the community get an idea of what the size of the threat is, the magnitude, and also the whole idea of we've got to educate. Okay, we've got these new warning signs, etc. Build that all into our education again, because there will be some things, that nuances that we'll have to carefully educate the community to be able to respond to. And then, and I like the idea too, how do we build this into Tsunami Ready? Well, we have to look at what the non-seismic sources, the kinds of activities and things we need to do at the community level to help prepare this there. So thank you so much, David, for your insights, as always. Okay, yeah, we're watching the clock very carefully. It's like watching a tsunami coming, but we're going to have to close up soon. But I really like to get into the panel discussion now. I hope all our panelists are still there. Our moderator today is Jutta Korovavalu, who's a National Professional Officer for Disaster Risk Reduction and Tsunami Warning at the Intergovernmental Oceanographic Commission of UNESCO. He's based in Fiji, and his work has been at the community, national, regional, global level, and has been a core of his professional experience. So, Jutta, in the time available, I'll pass it over to you. I noticed we've had a whole lot of questions online so far. Most of them have been answered within the chats, but if there's anything left there, but I know we have some very important questions to go to our panelists, and looking forward to getting their insights as well. I'll pass it over to you. Thank you, Jutta.
Thank you, Rick. And our first panelist today is Dr. Laura Kong, who is the Director of ITIC. I think Laura has been properly introduced earlier in the session. So, Laura, the question that we have for you is, how do we first determine the risk generated by non-seismic and complex sources? Sorry, Laura, you're muted.
Could you repeat that louder?
Yeah.
Background.
So the question we have for you, the question that we have for you, Laura, is that how do we first determine the risk of tsunamis generated by non-seismic and complex sources, drawing from the discussions that we've been having in this session?
Yes, I think Rafael made a nice presentation earlier about an ad hoc task team that's actually looking at volcano sources, which is to document historically where there's a potential. At the same time, we can do that with landslides. But I'm not quite sure what we might do if we said if a meteorite or asteroid might hit us. Maybe I'll leave that at that for other panelists. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura. Our next panelist is Mr. Yuji Nishimai, the scientific officer for the International Tsunami Information Center at the Japan Meteorological Agency. It operates the National Tsunami Warning Center for Japan. And JMA also acts as the tsunami service providers for countries in the Northwest Pacific Ocean. Mr. Yujimai is also the current chair of the IOC Intergovernmental Coordination Group for the Pacific Tsunami Warning and Mitigation System. So, Mr. Nishimai, through the experiences of Japan Meteorological Agency (JMA) as the National Tsunami Warning Center, and also as a TSP for the Northwest Pacific, how important it is for tsunami warning centers to have collaborative operational relationships with other authorities like volcano observatories and like the volcanic ash advisory centers. I know that there's been some questions floated in the Q&A as well, asking along similar lines on what are some of the importance of having this close collaboration between the tsunami warning centers and volcano observatories. Over to you, Mr. Nishimai.
Thank you very much. My name is Nishimai. I'm working with Japan Meteorological Agency. And thank you for questions. I think early detection of eruption of volcano and tsunami generation are regarding tsunami warning for the volcanic generated tsunami. In case of Hunga Hapai eruption and tsunami, JMA obtained the information of eruption from the Wellington Volcanic Ash Advisory Center through Tokyo Volcanic Ash Advisory Center. So I think of collaboration among earthquake and tsunami monitoring and volcano monitoring, including Volcanic Ash Advisory Center, is a very important tsunami warning procedures against the volcano-generated tsunami. So, and I think JMA may be an exceptional and a special organization. I think JMA has a responsibility for the issuance of a tsunami warning and also has a responsibility for issuance of information about the volcano activities. So JMA is monitoring volcanic activities using seismometer, GNS observation, and other methods. And the JMA has operated the Tokyo Volcanic Ash Advisory Center for safety of aircraft. And also furthermore, in JMA, staff of the earthquake and tsunami section and staff of volcano section and Tokyo Volcanic Advisory Center are working in the same floor, and information on volcanic activities is very smoothly between a volcanic section and earthquake and tsunami sections. For example, when a large eruption occurs, and its information is notified earthquake and tsunami section for the tsunami warning issue. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Nishimai-san. Our next panelist is Mr. Ofo Fanunu, Director of Fundamental Service. Do we have Ofo online, still online?
Yes, I'm here.
Thank you, Ofo. So one of the things that you highlighted in your presentation is the need for training around volcanoes for the Tsunami Warning Center. The question that we'd like to enlighten us with is in terms of what kind of competencies do the staff in tsunami warning centers need for warning of tsunamis that are generated by non-seismic and complex sources?
Yes, thank you, Juta. And I think this is a very important question and something that that we have tried to deal with it in the Pacific tsunami warning system itself, developing guidelines for competencies of watchkeeper. They are the ones that, especially surprising events or the unexpected events, that sometimes they have to make the call themselves while they are on duty without the intervention of their superiors. And we've set out guidelines that are still in testing under the PTWS. But it's very important, in my opinion, a few things that should be considered is, first of all, qualifications of this have been well trained in oceanography, tsunamis. Then they have to know the standard operating procedures on what's being used for warnings and things like this. Risk knowledge. They have to know the risk of every single island or every single community that can be warned or in that country. That's a big thing. That what we heard Indonesia along the lines of traditional knowledge. These things, we've done a lot of campaigning and a lot of collecting of traditional knowledge from all the islands in Tonga to reinforce the knowledge of our watchkeepers on the areas where it's highest risk. Yeah? But we also talked in this session about the when these unexpected events happen, that warnings, awareness of the public on the dangers. Yeah? So the watchkeepers need to also know how to provide awareness on these systems, or I mean on these events. Yeah? And it's something that we have put in place, that they are able to answer questions from the public at any time during their shift, and all of this information around the. Also important is tsunami ready package that we have already seen. But I mentioned the volcano training, as this event has enlightened us all, and we all know that we were unprepared for a volcano generated event. And so these are new competencies that we will need for the watch in the talking about this from our angle, because we are meteorologists. We went took a lot of time to train ourselves in the seismic part of things. We have instruments like SeisComp and all of these things to identify the earthquakes and make the call. But the knowledge on volcano and how things happening in the volcano, there needs to be some proper training, from closer collaboration between the geohazards department and the warning department. That's just how I saw it, and how we do things here in Tonga. Thank you.
I'll offer for that very comprehensive response to that question. Our next panelist is Dr. Sylvia Chacon Barantes, who is the coordinator of the National Tsunami Monitoring System, SIMONOT. that operates the National Tsunami Warning Center for Costa Rica. She is also the current chair of the IFC UNESCO Intergovernmental Group for Tsunami and Other Coastal Hazard Warning System for the Caribbean and adjacent regions. Welcome, Sylvia. The question I have for you is, the question I have for you, Sylvia, is what plans are in place or will be put in place to deal with warnings for tsunamis that are generated by non-seismic or complex sources in the Caribbean?
Good evening, Yutan and everybody from Costa Rica. We have a task team within Caribe AWS. We have a task team on tsunami procedure for volcanic tsunamis since several years now. As we have had increased volcanic activity in several of our volcanoes in the region in the past few years. So this task team was put in place and has been working since a few years now. And they have come with some procedures. And among these procedures is the definition and signing of MOU, Memorandum of Understanding, that should be signed between a volcanic observatory and the tsunami service provider, that in our case is the PTWC in Hawaii. As we have several volcanic observatories in the Caribbean, one of those was chosen as a pilot case, and the negotiations are still in place for signing this MOU. At the same time, we requested each of the volcanic observatories to identify and provide valuable information about possible tsunami generating locations on the volcanic areas of their area of responsibility. And some of our task team has prepared a very comprehensive study of active volcanoes and scenarios related to them. And modeling has been performed for some of them. This is still, of course, a work in progress, but we are hoping to have more advances in the upcoming months and years.
Thank you, Sylvia. We'll move on to our next panelist, Ms. Krista von Hildebrand Arande. She is the Deputy Director of the International Tsunami Information Center, Caribbean Office, formerly the manager of the U.S. National Weather Service Caribbean Tsunami Program, and now the Director of the Puerto Rico Seismic Network and Chair of the IOC ICG for the Caribbean and adjacent region. Welcome, Krista. The question I have, thank you. The question I have for you, so we can enlighten us with, is how can programs such as Tsunami Ready Communities prepare for all types of tsunamis, including those generated by non-seismic and complex sources?
So good evening, and first of all, thank you for the invitation, and second of all, thank you to the organizers as the co-chair of the Safe Ocean Laboratory for having organized this event. This is exactly what we were looking for, to have these in-depth discussions that we couldn't have when we have our global activities. So Tsunami Ready has been a program that I've been implementing for over 15 years, starting in Puerto Rico and then other islands of the Caribbean. And I think one of the most important things is that conversation and that trust and that relationship that is developed between the scientist and then the local community. So the people that live there, the authorities. And so when you have some events that are not typical or some that fall out, and you have to make these rapid changes and tell them what's going on, then there is that understanding, and from the authorities that are issuing the alerts to the people that are having to respond them, I think things go a little much smoother. I think they also develop like a lot of the like the observational capabilities that you need to like observe sea level stations or your seismic stations and things like that. They will support that those instruments be maintained, but that data be available, that the government supports those organizations. So that is very good because you develop that. I mean, we can't ever lose sight that lives are saved locally. So, I mean, if we don't go down to that level, we're not going to save lives. So whether it's a tsunami generated from, more typical source or something that's not as common, I think that's very important. I think another important thing is we had a lot of talk. I mean, David Kotze would have talked about some of the things, but local knowledge. Those are kind of things in traditional knowledge. Those comes out in those conversations when you're doing Tsunami Ready. When you do Tsunami Ready, you get together with the community and they say that. Another thing that we've had, I've worked in a couple of islands in the Caribbean, and we said, look, we're just going to model. All we do is model for tsunamis from earthquakes. And they're saying, no, you have to model that Kikimjeni volcano. And they did not let us go until we gave them some idea what that Kikimjeni volcano, if it made some eruption, what kind of tsunami it could be generated. So us scientists were reluctant, but they pushed us to do that. And I think that that's part of Tsunami Ready, because you really get into the concerns of the community. And yes, as you develop maps and protocols, I mean, if you have some basic map, you understand which are your low-lying areas, that's also going to help when you have another type of event. I think Ofa said, people just went to where they had to evacuate for non-volcanic eruption type scenarios. So you already have that established. Another very important point is in the SOPs, and when you're issuing products, is like you develop these capabilities for alerting, right? And you have to say there have to be multiple ways to receive and disseminate your products. And so that, this whole thing about communication, you have to have backup systems, and that's something that could come in very handy if your volcano knocked out some communication, you might have some other backup. We have sirens, and sirens can be used, to give out those messages. So I think I think that yes, you have it's much easier to go and deal with these, maybe these other less common sources of tsunamis if you are tsunami ready than you're not tsunami ready. Definitely tsunami ready communities are much better prepared to face tsunamis from other sources than those that are not tsunami ready. So hopefully we'll make that goal, and I think it's audacious, it's important, but it is a lot of work, and it's not just, oh, we're going to be tsunami ready. I mean, been there, done it. And, we're all going to have to, all of us scientists are going to have to get involved and help our communities, because they cannot do it without us. Thanks.
Thank you, Krista. We'll move on to our final panelist. Her name is Nurani Rama Hanifa. She is a researcher at the Research Center for Geotechnology, Research Organization for Earth Science, Natural Research and Innovation Agency, BRIN in Indonesia. She is also currently the Secretary General of the You Inspire, or the Youth and Young People Professional Platform in Science, Engineering, Technology, and Innovation. Welcome, Nurani. The question I have for you today is posed on how can young experts in disaster risk reduction help in developing community awareness and preparedness?
Thank you very much, Mr. Jiuta. Good morning and good evening. It is such an honor and pleasure to be invited in this distinguished forum. There is 38% young people between the age of 15 to 39 years of the globe population today. We believe that these young experts could bridge the generation gaps from the knowledge gap and also the generation gaps in a ways that are unconventional. There are a huge potential, but in some case still being idle. So we need to think what we need to plant now to harvest in 2030. For example, in the end of the UN Decade of Ocean, that's what the younger generation we need to invest. An exemplary case from young experts under the UNINSPIRE Alliance, a network of youth and young professionals in Asia and the Pacific, working in science, technology, and innovation to support disaster and climate resilience, currently in 14 country chapters, have contributed in at least 6 areas that can effectively and significantly help to develop community awareness and preparedness together with community at risk. The first is in more effective research and analyzing data and information. The second is on risk communication, art and design. The third one is development of innovative low-cost technologies and tools. The fourth one is applying science and technology advancement together with the local community on the local actions that directly contribute to the community. Fifth is supporting the evidence-based policymaking and advocacy based on data or the science policy nexus. And sixth, on socio-entrepreneurship. I totally agree with Ms. Krista on the importance of Tsunami Ready. And we can see how young people, for example, from Indonesia, are engaged in assessing the local tsunami to build Tsunami Ready, working together with UNESCO, BMKG, universities, research institutions, conducting detailed research on tsunami hazard and vulnerability modeling, being engaged as facilitator, creating educational tsunami ready board game, developing tsunami education on Tsunami Ready, developing web-based and cell phone-based application with local purpose, and detail mapping, as already mentioned, that we need detail mapping using drone and also participatory mapping. Young people from Maldives also are doing drone mapping and conducting drawing competition to understand the ideas of people about tsunamis and how their measure of tsunami are. Young people of Unsphere Japan are currently working on knowledge sharing by bridging the tsunami affected areas and future tsunami risk areas. Currently, they are developing a model field tour on creative tsunami learning. The tour is designed for use to actively work on mapping photos and narrative of now and the past for the future generation. Those are among the prime examples of the leading role of young people we are very proud of. The Alliance is positioning itself as an active network for international collaboration while mutual learning is encouraged to address the challenging local and transboundary issues such as tsunami. Within the region, we conduct knowledge exchange through young people stories, for example, in leveraging tsunami awareness and tsunami ready using science and technology as mutual learning from each country chapters. We could imagine the immense potential to accelerate the process and how powerful it could be significantly move the changes if given more space and also opportunities. Thank you.
Thank you, Rama. That was some great examples of how young people can be effectively engaged to further develop and improve our awareness and preparedness at the community level. And there was some fantastic examples that you shared with us. At this point, I'll yield the floor back to you, Rick. I know that we're pressed with time, so I'll leave it to you to decide where we go to next. Thank you, Rick.
Okay. Thank you, Juta. And what a lovely way to finish there. Our future is in good hands with the youth, and right now too, as we work forward with all of our programs and things. So I'm really happy that we heard all of that and the energy that's coming into our work through the younger generation, and we look forward to incorporating that. I guess our time is up now. I think it's been a fantastically interesting session of presentations and discussions. I'd like to thank all our presenters, our panel members, and you for your moderating. So I guess it is time to conclude this session today. We will be putting a report up on the website, the event website, incorporating the outcomes from this session. And not to forget, we do have another session tomorrow to be held 0700 to 0930 UTC, 7th of April. And we're going to build on to this. So we're going to be then talking about what do we know and need to know to warn for tsunamis generated by these non-seismic and complex sources. As I said, when we've completed these two sessions, we'll put a report of the outcomes and all the interesting findings. The presentations will go also up on our event website, so you can go back and have a look at these. So for now, thank you again, everybody, from the bottom of my heart and from all the communities, our at-risk communities, for the work you're doing, the thoughts you're having, the passion that you're putting into your work. So I'll call that a close today for this session A, the Space Ocean Laboratory Satellite Activity, Further Challenges for Warnings of Tsunamis. Take care, everybody, and thank you again for your participation and contributions. Thank you, and take care.
Thank you, Rick.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Judah.
Thank you, everyone.
Okay, thank you,
It's
everybody.
been wonderful. Thanks for everybody's help behind the scenes too. I should mention that. Adita, Nora, Juta, Gabby has had to leave us too. It's been fantastic, and for everybody, like I said, sparing their time for this. It's been enjoyable. It's a tough topic that we're dealing with, but it's a good team that's working. Thank you. And we've had a lot of great participation. We had over 150 participants today, which is great to see as well. It's all part of the awareness, all part of the education. We all learn from each other on these important topics. So I guess we'll say goodbye from now, unless Adito, did you have anything in the background there technically, Nora?
No, maybe just to remind on section B.
Right. You mean in the timing, or we'll be using a different link tomorrow? That's important for that. Again, the panelists and the presenters should use the link that came to them, especially with the term panelist in the heading. So it'll all be different links again tomorrow. Anything else there, Adito?
No, not from my side. Thank you.
Okay, that'd be great. And then that'll be followed by the Tsunami, first of the Tsunami Ready sessions tomorrow too. So that'll be really interesting to see. There's some great interviews with community leaders that have been involved in Tsunami Ready. There'll be one straight after our session, and then there'll be another session several hours later on to help with the time zones in the different parts of the world. So busy times, but a lot of interesting information, a lot of take-home messages. And thank you again, Rama, for bringing that youth input into this as well. We really want to make a lot more use of that, and like we've discussed before, even at the ICG level, it would be great to have your teams and representatives engaged there. I know you're working with all the countries in that anyway, so all of that effort is coming in through the national contributions anyway. But I think there's some great leadership roles there for the younger generations as well.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rick, for inviting me to this forum and providing an opportunity to also showcase some youth participation and young expert participation. I hope that we can also conduct some concrete, continue. I think we've been engaged with Pardito quite some years, and including for Tsunami Ready, and I hope that we can also continue the collaboration with IUC UNESCO, dispatching more young people to the field and bridging research to local actions. I think Bu Harkunti also have many students and also young career researchers, that also doing activities on bridging research to communities.
Yes.
I was going to ask you, Rama, if you have your networks in the Southwest Pacific.
Yes, that's also something that I've been discussing with Irina and Pardito as well. So we are starting to have our network in Fiji, but we haven't yet with Tonga. So if you also have some other use with Tonga, maybe it will be also beneficial. We are also connected with New Zealand through Professor Ailsa Holloway mainly, but not yet really engaging with the young people. I mean, not in our network yet, but we have started with Fiji.
All right, I'll be keen to know who is your contact person in Fiji, so I can do some work with you guys, and also align some of the UNESCO activities in the Pacific Islands with your group.
Yes, thank you. I will send you our focal point for Fiji. There are 2 persons. Currently, they are still establishing their country chapters, and they are directly connected with the head of NDMA. Of Fiji, so that's very nice, and that's new examples, because I think the other chapters are struggling to connect with NDMA, but Fiji is starting from the head of NDMA, Ms. Fasiti Soko.
Yeah, great, fantastic. So we'll catch up later on.
Thank you.
On this,
That's always important, isn't it? Getting those right connections and into the system at the right place. It's half the battle sometimes. It's to find that, and also to connect across all these different activities, because there is a lot of good effort going on, and to harness all that extra good work, that'd be fantastic. It would be great, to see. I'm sure it would catch on so easily across the Pacific. Because, like I said, in all my travels throughout the Pacific, and the communities They have lots to share, so proactive, so engaging. It's a joy. And to be honest, so much to learn from. You know, we talk about resilient communities. These communities have resilience.
70% of our population are young people. So if we get that 70% to be aware, that's it.
Exactly.
Yeah,
exactly. Exactly. And propagate this too, because it's passing the baton all the time, you know. That's why I always like, you know, like the tradition, some even the storytelling, it's so fundamental. It really carries this information through time, you know. We don't have to wait for the next tsunami. The story's there, you know, it's been told every day to small children as they grow up, and they remember these things. It's built in to their genetics right from an early age. It's terrific. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you too. This is all the support from UNESCO IOC since our establishment. And Parik, I have mentioned to Pardito that you wanted the Tsunami Ready board game to send to you. And we will be playing the Tsunami Ready board game in Manila on the Asia Pacific Science Technology Conference with UNDRR Asia Pacific and the Philippines.
We just established the contract. So for sending the Tsunami Ready to Paris, Melbourne, and Perth. So hopefully you'll be receiving.
You can get it to Fiji.
Yes, maybe on the next contract we'll look into Fiji.
We'll do that. I see we have a lot of participants online. Get onto the IOTIC website. They've come up with a fantastic Tsunami Ready board game.
That'll be great to introduce it through Rama's group.
Thank you very much. Looking forward for your continuous mentoring.
Thank you, everybody.
Take care.
Thank you.
Okay. Yeah.
Bye.
I'm leaving too. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay. All right. So it might be time. Hello, Nora. Hello, Adito. Again, thank you for your help today too, and all of the weeks leading up to this. Much appreciated. We've got tomorrow to go as well. I look forward to that and the new range of faces, presenters and panelists. So that will be terrific. But I better go now. My voice is giving up on me.
Okay.
Okay.
Bye.
See you when we catch up.
See you tomorrow.
Catch up.
We'll catch up.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Goodbye. Goodbye, everybody else that's still out there. Goodbye.
Yeah, it's my colleague Gani.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Okay.
You're most welcome, Pak. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks again.
Yes, thank you, all the IT support there in Jakarta. Yes, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Terima kasih.
Mungkin recordingnya kita off, kan?